All right, good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Dr. Thomason, roll call.
President Kaler, please let the record show that we have all 5 board members in attendance tonight.
Thank you very much. We are going to have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I move that we approve the agenda. Second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Superintendents Report.
President Kaler, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Foley to read about upcoming events.
Thank you.
President Kaler, members of the board, we have some upcoming events that we'd like to make everyone aware of. Obviously, we have the September 7th Labor Day up there, as well as 2 upcoming board meetings in the month of September. In addition to these upcoming events, we have something positive, wonderful, and happy to share. We wanted to share and congratulate Mr. Tannenbaum and his absolutely lovely wife, Morgan, who yesterday afternoon welcomed their baby boy. Let me introduce you to Owen Richard Tannenbaum, who tipped the scales at 10 pounds and 2 ounces.
Congratulations to the Tannenbaum family. Thank you for sharing that with us tonight.
Yes, happy news.
Yes, we love a happy news. All right, we're going to move on to some board comments. Anybody have any comments tonight? All quiet on the front. We have a lot of requests to speak comments, so let's get right to those. We value input from our constituents. This time has been set aside for anyone from the audience who wishes to address the board. Please remember, this is not an appropriate venue to evaluate, discuss, or criticize district personnel. Policy KEB provides a process for complaints about personnel. Speakers should be aware that the false statements about individuals may result in civil liability. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431-01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Thomason and Mrs. Martins tonight.
President Kaler, I'm ever grateful to have Executive Director of Human Resources, Mom Martins, helping me tonight. We do have quite a few to get through. It'll probably take us a little over an hour, so we'll get started right away. The first one I have is from Sharon Dalton. She has children at Gateway Point, Cooley, and Williamsfield. Please do not open schools until it is safe, possibly second semester.
We have Scott and Katie Bucci, children at Gateway Point, Cooley Middle School, and Williamsfield High School. Please wait until safety metrics have been met and maintained as planned before reopening schools.
Next, we have Jeremy Broomer with 10 kids. As an employee and as a parent of 10 children, I would like to put my request in that we do not return via hybrid model, but return to full-time learning when the time does happen. Hybrid learning, where students only go 2 to 3 times per week and then do remote learning the remaining days, would be very challenging for parents to navigate and figure out opportunities appropriate for supervision of their children. Although on paper it may seem like a safer option, it will put even more undue pressure on parents to make appropriate arrangements for their children because of not having a consistent schedule during the week to count on. It will also place a lot more work on the district employees to make it all work smoothly for all parties involved. We have great parents in this district, and I feel blessed to be working with them on behalf of their children's education, and hope that if the decision to go back is either via hybrid model or full-time learning, we would choose full-time learning to help support our parents and the students. Thank you for your time.
Barbara Sumners, Williamsfield. HUSD Board and Leadership. My family is greatly disappointed in the manipulation of the metrics that don't consider families and staff that live, work, and congregate outside of the specific zip codes that make up our district. I am saddened that no consideration was taken into account for these important pieces in our overall safety for students and staff. It is also further noted that the district and board has not taken into consideration the problems that arise for families who have chosen the online learning option via the numerous surveys distributed. My family has only indicated online since the first survey in June, and still my student schedule contained of 3 of 5 classes that will not be offered on the online model, which I have been told by various staff members, counselor and case manager and dean of students, that these classes were requested to be purchased from Florida Virtual Learning School, FVLS, and the board declined them. I asked 1 week into school that my child be moved to classes that were going to be online to prevent a disruption in learning, and was told to send her for just those classes. Hard pass on that, but no one made the accommodations requested. We are now far enough into the year that losing those classes becomes a huge disruption to learning, as starting other classes would mean trying to catch up. We've been told by several administration members and school counselor that not finishing the full semester means no credit for work done. These classes are all needed for graduation, one of them specific math class that was not included in the purchase from FVLS, even though it is available. I know I'm not alone in my concern for loss of classes, especially at this late point. I hope that the agenda will be revised quickly to include accommodations for students to finish courses they have already started online with their current teachers. Unfortunately, I do not expect the board or administration to have any concern for the disruption in learning or the loss of students who might move to GPS or MPS, where the online academics offer most all of the courses not being offered by HUSD. I hope that those board members who wanted metrics to be met before returning to school are taking into consideration that those metrics provided are so narrow, they do not truly cover the scope of our community and how this and the disruption to learning due to classes not being offered that students already started could impact so many. Disappointed but not alone, Barbara Subners, longtime HUSD supporter.
Matthew Gray. I would like to thank the board for their previous decisions keeping our teachers and students safe by online learning. Also, school administrators for working tirelessly to get plans in motion. I am deeply concerned that we will have an outbreak when we come back to school, especially when you look at other districts throughout the nation who are now having to close and go back to online learning. A hybrid option is sensible, especially when it comes to cleaning our classrooms and maintaining safe, healthy hygiene. Again, thank you for the very important and tough decisions the board members have made.
And I apologize if I butcher names, but Andrew Boatstis. I would like to thank the board for all their hard work during this difficult time, but I feel that it is a bad idea to open schools at this time. The chance for more infections is too great, and I feel that starting school at this time will fragment our student population, making it harder to reach students due to inconsistent attendance by both teachers and students. Also, the district is still waiting for sanitizing equipment. Please wait until end of quarter 1. I feel the data will only improve and we can return to school with less distractions and spend more of our efforts connecting with students and promoting teaching and learning.
From Don Anderson, a child at Higley High School. Hello, I teach at Higley High School and have been an employee of Higley Unified School District for 15 years. I am department chair and nationally board certified. I know our admin has worked tirelessly to come up with a workable plan, and I respect and thank the board for all its efforts as well. But I do not personally think we should return to campus yet. I write to you to voice my opposition to the return to school date the board is considering based on the following. 1, the teacher survey conducted about return to school was not adequately worded for the board to have a correct idea of how many staff are actually opposed to the return to on-campus learning. 2, the AZ health data shared in the return to campus presentation by Dr. Foley showed we have not actually met the Arizona Department of Health metric for on-campus learning, but somehow we counted it as met, which betrays fidelity with the board's original decision. 3, the plan shared with staff during today's meeting, it was inadequate to address my concerns, my own personal health concerns. 4, I am concerned that some of the sanitizing precautions, such as fogging rooms, will have a negative impact on my breathing issues. 5, I am concerned that students' flows at the secondary level have not been addressed, nor has the number of students on campus been limited. Massive bottlenecks of students in hallways are likely during passing periods, and that is unacceptable to me. 6, we were told that we were still waiting on back-ordered PPE, and that is too much to gamble with the need to properly sanitize. 7, we were told we would follow a regular schedule, which will do little to minimize congestion in the hallways and the classrooms. 8, it feels rushed. We should at least look at a 2 to 3 week data from Queen Creek High School before making decisions to meet face-to-face. After 2 to 3 weeks of face-to-face interaction, then we will know for sure if their model is protecting students and staff. Why should we do another experiment when we clearly have imminent data from a neighboring district without risking our own staff or students? 9, some classrooms are furnished with tables and not desks, and yet no provisions in the plan addresses how to separate students appropriately for their safety during instructional periods. 10, when does the training we need to get up and to speed occur? Don't get me wrong, I long to return to my classroom. Not under these circumstances, though. I request you consider adhering to the original decision for remote learning and look at the data again once fall break commences. Thank you.
Stephen Bain, Williamsfield High School. Dear Higley School District Board members, let me start by first thanking you for your hard work and consideration for Higley teachers. After today's meeting with administration, I would like to bring some concerns that you may not have heard about before you vote to reopen schools on September 8th, 2020. I'm deeply concerned that it is not, as of yet, safe to reopen schools. I see news stories of school personnel who have contracted COVID-19 on a daily basis. This tells me we should continue to wait until the Arizona Department of Health metrics are met. I appreciate that Dr. Foley took the time to explain the metrics to us, but it does not make me feel any better about my safety or the safety of my students. The positivity rate is still unmet for state statistics, and the district's stats for positivity are still in the yellow. I do not see how we are meeting the guidelines. Yes, we have met 2, but it appears we have 1 to go. I would compare the decision to open before all metrics are met to that of hiring a teacher with missing qualifications. Given the high standards Higley Unified holds for its teachers, I don't think the district would be okay to hire a teacher with just some of their credentials. I fail to see why we would make a decision while still missing a key qualification. We are all suffering from stress and want to be back in the classroom. I sit at my desk looking at name boxes instead of my students' faces. My back and legs ache from sitting in a chair so long. I miss my students, I miss the classroom, I miss my colleagues, and I worry that one of my students might be struggling at home and missing out on their education. However, I'm willing to put up with the discomfort, technical problems, and stress if it saves someone's life or health. I feel we are trying to rush back into this too fast. Beyond the metrics, the sanitation stations are on back order. The new computers for students have not arrived, and we know very little about the chemicals being used to fog our rooms. I worry that within the first days of reopen, I will have students breaking out in rashes and allergic reactions. I see and appreciate how hard our administrators have been working to make this plan work. They want everyone back in school as bad as we want to be back, but I do not think we are ready. Further, I would like you to consider what we teachers have been going through as well. None of us know if it's safe to return, and we trust that our governing board will make the right decisions for everyone involved, teachers and students alike. Lately, we've witnessed changing reopening dates, and we do not know how far out we should plan anything. I think I can speak on behalf of many other teachers by saying we are prematurely worn out from all of this, and it's taken a physical toll on us. Instead of being rested and ready to go, we are anxious and exhausted. We will likely return with ran-down immune systems at a time when we need to be at our best. Again, I appreciate all you have done thus far, and will go back in the classroom when you give the green light, but I ask that you take my concerns into your account during tonight's vote. Thank you, Mr. Stephen Bain, Masters of Education, U.S. and World History teacher, Higley High School.
John Arnold, students at Williamsfield High School. Good evening, Governing Board. I am writing to you after looking through the PowerPoint that was made available to the public. I am saddened to see that the data being included is not consistent. I feel you should follow the science and data from either the Arizona Department of Health Services or Maricopa County. You should not be combining data to make it fit for you. As educators, we should be role models for our children. We do not get to pick or choose the information. Both sets of data say we should not be going back yet. We are still in the moderate risk range. We need to show our kids that science matters, and we will listen to what it says. A few more weeks will let us see the impact of the other school openings will have on the community. There is no reason to rush this. A few more weeks will only help us to ensure that when we do go back, we will be able to stay there. I know we want life back to normal, but making sure we handle the virus with caution and concern is of the utmost importance. It is our job as adults to make sure it is safe for our kids, our teachers, and all of our staff. I would also like to thank my child's teachers at Williamsfield. They have been hardworking, and their dedication shines through their lessons they are providing. We are fortunate to have such wonderful educators in our district. Thank you for your time.
Jonathan Bish. I want to thank the board for allowing me to comment on this agenda item. I'm a proud teacher at Higley High School and would love to return to my classroom and teach my students, but I only want that when my health and the health of my students isn't in danger. From my perspective as a history teacher, I see this as a turning point moment. If the wrong decision is made, we will look back at this moment and scratch our heads and wonder why we wanted to go back so soon. My concern is that we as a district aren't ready to return, not yet. I look at universities like Notre Dame and their extensive budget, and if they weren't able to stop a spike in cases, how can we be assured without doubts that the same will not happen for us? I plead and ask the board to exercise wisdom and patience in making any decision about reopening for in-person learning. Thank you.
Jude Blaine, children at Gateway Point Elementary and Cooley Middle School. Dear Governing Board President Kaler, board members, Dr. Thomason, Dr. Foley, and cabinet members, I find myself in a quandary since I hold a variety of roles in our district. I am a parent, I'm a teacher, and I am a representative of a collective voice of educators. While the majority of educators who have reached out to me share my views, I am not speaking for all teachers in our district. I firmly believe that the benchmark data regarding COVID-19 cases needs to be attained and sustained prior to approving in-person learning. To base our return to in-person learning on the fact that the data is trending that way is not safe or in the best interest of the staff and students. Being in education, we all know that data changes, so do trends. Big hair and using copious amounts of Aquanet hairspray were a trend. Thankfully, fashion is not moving back in that direction. But all joking aside, there are a lot of factors in our immediate area that could very likely change the way COVID-19 data is trending. Unfortunately, we will not know the impact for some time because of the lag in data that is presented by the state. Basically, we are basing our decision to return to in-person learning on a hunch. Some may argue that I am basing my claim that the data will trend back to the red on a hunch as well. Well, that is a valid argument. I would rather err on the side of caution and ensure the benchmark data sustains green results before our students and staff experiment with trends. For argument's sake, will the governing board convene if any of the benchmarks from the Arizona Department of Health Services or Maricopa County change to yellow or red and vote to extend our remote learning? There is a concern regarding the social and emotional health of our students. This is a valid concern and one that I feel in my own home, but explain how the social and emotional health of a student or staff member will be handled when they have the realization that they are responsible for the illness or even worse of another person. Regarding social and emotional health and the uncertainty of the situation we are in is taking its toll on our staff. I have worked more hours this quarter than any quarter in my previous 17 years of teaching. I am doing everything I can to provide rigorous, engaging instruction for all of my students each and every day. I am learning new technology and varying ways to use the new technology to reach my students. I am analyzing student work and constantly providing feedback on their assignments or making short videos to review the procedures of the concepts that they do not understand yet. Educators want to do what is in the best for their students. We always have. Educators are also being reminded that the survey results state that teachers want to be back in the classroom with their students. Well, of course we do. We do not need that reminder. But the part of that statement that is being left off is when it is safe. I do not feel that the return to in-person learning is safe yet. Please consider continuing with remote instruction until second quarter. Thank you.
George Costelis. I am nervous as a teacher to go back to school. We all know that COVID infection rate will spike if we open up the schools. Children can't grow in an environment of fear. We still need to learn more about COVID while stopping it from spiking. We need to lead by example and keep our schools closed so we can get this pandemic under control before the flu season hits. The procedures in place are well-intentioned, but they won't stop the infection rate. I have been a teacher for 11 years, and I have seen how students and faculty get sick each year. Hand sanitizer and a fog machine won't stop people from breathing the same air for 55-minute periods. The biology is obvious. Don't open the schools until we see how COVID reacts during flu season.
Leah Davis, children at Santan and Sossaman. Hello, I'm the mother of 2 children in the district and a substitute teacher. This is not the right time to send the kids back to school in person. We need to stick to the plan and wait till we meet the health metrics. If we go back now, we not only are putting teachers, staff, and students at risk, but we will most likely have to shut down within the first week or two due to severe contagious nature of the COVID-19. As already experienced in other states, we need to do what's right and socially responsible for our community. Thank you. A proud Santan and Sossaman parent.
Jennifer Zauer, Santan and Sossaman. I'm writing you today to urge you to please not rush into reopening too quickly. Like many in our community, we are pleased to see that our numbers are headed in the right direction. Just 2 weeks ago at the meeting on August 8th, you, the governing board, said that you wish that there was data by district and not by county to make the decisions for our schools. You are now choosing to use some Maricopa County data and some Higley District data to make your decisions. You asked for data by district, you got it, and when it didn't meet your needs, you have now decided that the Maricopa data isn't so bad after all, just so you can say that we are in the green in Higley when we are not. According to data dashboard that has been provided by Maricopa County Department of Public Health that was last updated on August 20th, we are in the moderate range in the Higley District. Being in this for 2 solid weeks indicates that we could open for hybrid instruction. It's my understanding that HUSD does not have a plan that allows for hybrid instruction. Therefore, if we're following the metrics to open sooner than October 12th, as you indicated you would do, we need to wait until we have been in the green for 2 weeks before we fully open. The earliest possible date we can be in the green for 2 weeks in the Higley District would be September 3rd. If you follow this and follow your words to give parents a full week's notice before opening, the earliest we should open for in-person instruction would be Thursday, September 10th, or Monday the 14th, if you don't want to start midweek. Along my thoughts above, I would like to point out that one of the biggest concerns that has been shared throughout this entire time has been the mental and emotional health of young children. As I am sure you have seen, many schools have opened and had to shut quickly due to COVID, even here in Tucson after only 3 days. This too is incredibly difficult on the mental well-being of children. This is another reason why it would be beneficial to wait until we are in the green for 2 full weeks to open. It would give us the best chance of opening and stay open rather than bouncing back and forth. Children need as much stability and security as we can give them these days. If waiting just a couple more weeks provides this opportunity, it would be one we should strongly consider. Lastly, we've been given the opportunity to watch other districts who have opened this week. I believe there's great value in allowing those districts to be open for a couple of weeks before we make any decisions. We know they can take up to 2 weeks from COVID exposure before people are sick, so let's wait until schools have been open for at least 2 weeks before making decisions. In addition, it was just made a requirement on Monday of this week for schools to report COVID cases. I'm willing to bet that there were cases last week that we don't know about due to the fact they weren't required to report it until this week. In addition, we can learn about what districts did that worked or what isn't working based on any closures that happen. As parents, educators, and community members, we always are teaching children to pay attention to what's happening around them, learn from others' mistakes, and most importantly, be true to your word. I hope that you, as HUSD governing board members, do the same.
Robert Colbert, children at Williamsfield High School and Cooley Middle School. Why are we basing an important decision on selective data from different sources? You're handpicking data to support schools reopening early. If you force the schools to open early, you run the risk of an extended shutdown, which is counterproductive. The better long-term option would be to stick to the original plan by reopening after Q1. By doing so, you will have extended the quarantine, helping ensure a continued reduction of COVID-19 cases and increasing the odds that we will avoid a shutdown when kids return to the campus.
Angie Idledwine, Centennial Sossaman. I've known since remote learning started that at some point schools would go back in person and things, classes, teachers, and so on, would change both for those going in person and for those staying online. As the quarter has progressed, we have settled into a nice groove, knowing that the board previously indicated in-person learning was likely to start after fall break unless benchmarks were met sooner. Looking at the dashboards today, neither the state nor the district levels are all in the green yet. Yellow still means hybrid, which we were told previously was not a possibility due to funding. But that's where we're at right now, hybrid. The fact that stats are being cherry-picked to justify a full in-person return is concerning, and I question the wisdom of this push to return in person on September 8th. Not only are the benchmarks not fully in green, we are surrounded by neighboring communities that are also not in the green. In fact, Mesa is both a city and a school district are still in red. We are not some small remote community here in HUSD. To not consider our neighboring communities does a grave disservice to us all. In addition to not quite meeting the benchmarks, why now? If we return to in-person learning on the 8th of September, we have less than 3 weeks before fall break. Who benefits from having everything thrown into chaos with changing teachers, classmates, and everything else that close to the quarter end and fall break? Also, on the subject of timing, we have area schools that started in person last week. There hasn't been enough time to see how their return will affect the numbers, if they indeed do. Why are we not giving things more time just to see how safe the proposed return is, considering the lag time of how COVID presents? As much as I understand the desire to return to some semblance of normalcy, rushing to return to school in person is not the way to go about it. We have seen the evidence across the country, and indeed even in Arizona when schools reopen. New cases happen, kids and staff are quarantined, and schools shut down again. We will reverse our current trend, which is bad for everyone. Let us really meet the benchmarks into the green so we do open schools, we can keep them open.
Mandy Brocker, children at Coronado and Cooley Middle. First, please allow me to thank the board for doing what it can to keep our children and community safe by listening to our public health experts. Remote schooling is not ideal, but your teachers and staff have been amazing at making it all work. I will ask that you consider a hybrid program so that we can safely take small steps and combine an in-person and remote learning experience. I also ask if all possible, we be allowed to keep our home campus teachers, as some of us, while not returning to in-person schooling immediately, still desire to remain part of the school community to join our classmates as soon as it is possible for our family. That said, we have all compromised as there are no perfect solutions. Please, it would be a tragic mistake to rush school opening, only to have to close down after a short time. Let's take it slow, wait for the full compliance of Arizona Department of Health Services recommendations, and most importantly, get true buy-in from all teaching staff before opening to any in-person schooling. This partnership with your teachers' full support is most vital step in a successful in-person return. If the Arizona Department of Health Services says yes, but the teachers say no, we should wait. Teachers make it all happen. Please listen to them over everyone else. Thank you again for all your time, energy, and efforts.
Joshua Pleasant, Centennial Elementary. It's too early to open up schools. As a healthcare professional, I find it disturbing that the Maricopa County tracker shows that we should be hybrid, and the board is considering full-time in-person school learning. If you look at what is happening in boarding school systems, Queen Creek, there were potentially up to 30 students exposed to COVID-19, and they have been back to school for only a few weeks. We should not have to manipulate the data to justify returning to in-person learning. We are not ready yet. I have friends that are teachers for schools that opened already, and I've heard horror stories. There is also the problem of reporting COVID-19 positive cases that occur within schools. Please do not fight the state mandate to report positive cases to the parents. All parents deserve to know, and school staff. As a parent, I just do not have enough proof that you can protect my 2 boys enough to consider sending them back to school in person. This is a travesty, as I should not have to decide on choosing between keeping my children healthy and safe versus a quality education. Let's face it, when you resume in-person school learning, the quality of education that my 2 boys will receive will be reduced dramatically. My boys will also receive less social interaction with their classmates. In conclusion, there's just too many questions to be left unanswered. Do not proceed too early, as it could be a giant setback for all involved.
Carrie Matthew. I have taught at Higley's High School since 2012. I have been impressed with my site and the district good faith leadership during this time. I truly believe that everyone is trying to make the best possible decision. However, I have many concerns about returning to in-person instruction. While much has been done to address surface sanitation, there has been little done to address the issue with airborne transmission, which is the most important factor in reducing the infection rates. Class size have not been reduced. No attempts have been made to reduce numbers of the students on the campus in order to create the possibility of physical distancing. I have a class with 41 students, and others have similar class sizes. There is no way to have physical distance with that many adult-sized students in the classroom. I have been told that reducing the class size is unlikely because of the disruption and rescheduling of students. Other teachers and I do have individual student desks. We have the flexible seating and tables. Students in my classroom sit inches apart, facing each other. While this was excellent for student interaction, this is terrible for COVID transmission. There are not enough student desks to change the furniture to at least having students face in the same direction. When I asked why a block schedule has not been considered as a way to minimize numbers of students on campus, I was told that the feeling was that the teachers would require more professional development to make that work, and that we did not have time to do that successfully. As a professional educator, I am disturbed by the decision that it is better to create a more dangerous environment on campus than trust teachers to adjust to a new schedule and new habits. We have worked tirelessly since March to learn new skills, to adjust to new expectations and new realities. A more creative schedule would not be outside of the skill set of any teacher that I know. And if time for preparation for a more safe schedule is needed, then it seems that a rushed return to the campus is counterproductive. I can see that enormous efforts have been made to sanitize, to provide protective gear, and to make a firm face covering policy. Those are important, but nothing has been done to even create the possibility of physical distancing, which is the single biggest factor in reducing transmission. I would like to see this issue addressed with the same consciousness with which other factors have been considered.
Casey Derkowitz. To the board, let me begin by acknowledging the well-intentioned and professional leadership we received at my site and within the district. Everyone is trying to navigate an almost unnavigable situation while keeping the students' needs and teachers' needs all in mind. A lot of great steps have been taken towards making the situation feel safer for both students and teachers. Despite this, I do have a few concerns. With social distancing being one of the most effective ways to slow the spread of the virus, it is adamant that class sizes be shrunk. In many cases, class sizes are upwards of 32 or more students, in some cases breaching 40 students. Large class sizes are difficult enough, but when you combine that with small room sizes, this seems to be a potential environment where the virus can quickly spread. What efforts are being made? What efforts are being made to accommodate this problem to prevent this from happening? If and when there is an outbreak, what will the district's response be? At what point will the district consider reverting to a remote learning model? Has the situation in Queen Creek been investigated by the district for examples of good ideas and examples of bad ideas for reopening the district? While I understand the importance of getting the students back in class, especially when it comes to their mental health, I believe that more planning needs to be done to ready ourselves for the potential problems that will inevitably arise with the return to in-person instruction. There will be problems that appear despite our best laid plans, but in situations like this, we set goals and do everything we can to control what we can control. Thank you for your time and attention to this, also for your support of the teachers and support staff within the district. Casey Dirkowitz.
April French with a student at Sue Osman Preschool. After sitting in a virtual staff meeting this afternoon, I have learned that we will most likely be voting to overturn your original decision of reevaluating until after fall break, and instead, we will have us return immediately following Labor Day weekend. This is frustrating. This is a frustrating realization, and honestly feels like a bit of a betrayal from the school board. In an effort to appease the concerns of a few loud voices who won't actually be in the classroom, you are most likely going to change our schedule again. There are too many unknown factors to consider. I don't understand, and it's overwhelming. It's confusing. I also don't understand that if it is safe to return, why aren't you allowing anyone in the boardroom? We are going to be expected to conduct our business behind a mask. Why aren't you speaking from behind yours if it's a district mandate? If you are worried that people may not understand what you are communicating, don't you think the same thing will translate to the students and teachers? My concern now is for students who can't or aren't returning to in-person. Students I care deeply about. Last week, one of my students began smiling and laughing and then immediately started crying. When I asked him why, he said, "Because I know that when it's time to go back to the in-classroom, especially if it's too soon, my parents told me I won't be able to go to school in person. I am having so much fun and need this class. I am sad because I know it's going to end soon." And another one said, "I don't think I am going to be able to cope if we go back too soon. I know I won't be allowed to return yet, and I'm going to miss my friends. This is the only class I care about. I'm going to be stuck online with someone who doesn't care about me." They were told they would have until at least fall break. You told them that, as teachers, we plan for that. It logically makes sense to wait it out for those remaining couple of weeks. We've made it this far.
Nicole Camp, Cooley and Chaparral. I realize a lot of parents don't care about the kids who have to stay at home when schools open up, but there are parents who do. From the information we've been given so far, it sounds like the kids who will be remaining online will be left with losing their teachers and classes they've grown to like. These kids will be left without the option to continue their accelerated courses, and there has been zero assurance the district will be fixing this issue. The kids will be losing the opportunity to continue their elective courses. Why are these kids being punished for having to stay home? They're already going to miss out on being at school. Now they can't even continue on their current educational paths. Those of us who have opted to keep our kids online for health reasons feel like we're being forced to send our kids to campus just so our kids won't lose their accelerated courses and credits. You need to make it so these kids can continue these courses either online or by following video of live classes from home. Work it out. If you have to open school so soon, then you can work out better online options for the smart kids.
Casey Blonde, students in kinder and second grade. I'm an emergency department nurse working in our community. I can speak from firsthand knowledge. This pandemic is nowhere near contained or controlled. I see many COVID patients every day in my department. Many can go home, but many need to be admitted. These people are very contagious and very ill. The number reported by the health departments do not actually tell the story. Our positivity numbers are down because hospitals have in the past 2 weeks started testing every admitted patient. So yes, positivity rates will drop because of this. Has it gotten better? Yes. Is it controlled? Absolutely not. Please, let's not use our children in Higley as a test subjects to see if it's safe for schools yet. Let's wait until the October day to see what happens and how other districts are going back. Let's see if the rates rise, which I know they will. The online learning has been fantastic for our kids. Please don't take this from them. Please don't remove them from their teachers. They've grown to love over the past weeks. Please make the scientific decision. Thank you for your time.
Alana Chernovsky, a teacher at Higley High. Members of the board, my name is Alana Chernovsky. I teach AP and U.S. History at Higley High School. Yesterday, Higley High had a staff meeting about the potential to return to school on September 8th. I'm very thankful for my administration and their willingness to support staff during this time, though the information shared with us was deeply concerning to me and many of my colleagues. As questions were asked, the answers from admin did not calm any nerves. First, the data that was used to come to a return to school date has been manipulated in a way that I do not believe was intended by the AZ Department of Health. Creating averages that look good enough in order to show the metrics have been met was met with disbelief. As the Arizona Department of Health website continues to update and show how schools in Maricopa County have not met those benchmarks, Higley has averaged them to a pass. I would be met with extreme criticism if I chose to use this math to pass students in my class. We were made aware that some district PPE has been backordered, though Higley High School has a good supply to start. How will we know how long the backorder will stay in place? We were told we will receive health training to return back. As teachers, we are barely keeping our heads above water with online teaching, grading, contacting parents/students, meetings, planning, and creating modules. Now add trainings that have not been introduced. Will we be expected to do the training on the weekend before we go back? We were also told the district will be one-to-one for technology, so we do not need to be collecting papers from students, except there is no date when those computers will actually arrive, since this purchase is being approved this evening. So what are we supposed to do in the interim? Will students be instructed to bring their own technology? Will the network support this? Because it is not in the past. With 150 students entering my classroom in a day, how can I ensure that their physical safety will be met as well as their educational needs when so many items are backordered until an unknown date? Physical distancing has proven to be the best form of slowing the disease. How will that happen when hundreds of students are in the hallway in a 5-minute period and over 35 students sit in a small classroom for an hour? How do we just go back to normal on Tuesday after finishing virtual on Friday? I am aware that the answer is for teachers to spend their 3-day weekend planning and setting up during a time we should all be taking the day off, so we all so desperately need. It is my opinion, if we were actually allowed one, the fall break would be the best for planning and preparation for this new normal we must navigate. This was a date that was decided several weeks ago, and lunch benchmarks were met. According to the health department, they have not been met. While we have all been on this roller coaster, teachers have not had the ability to plan more than a week in advance because the expectations and chance of going back is always up in the air. The goalpost keeps getting moved. October 12th allows everyone a fresh start, a natural break in the progress period for students who chose not to return, and will begin new teachers online. If you are unaware, if a student moves out of a class, their grades do not automatically merge into a new classroom. They must be entered manually in the new teacher's gradebook. The idea of scrambling to start, then go on vacation 14 school days later is not what's best for the classroom and education. It's confusing, chaotic, and frankly scary. It has always been my goal to be the best teacher and educator. I have rolled with punches before. There have been changes in funding, expectations from admin, and new curriculum to name a few, but this is different. This is my 12th year in Higley. I consider it my home, but these are people's lives and livelihoods we are gambling with. The rush to open based on cherry-picked data is not what's best for students, staff, or the community. Thank you for reading and understanding what pressure teachers are feeling during this time.
Kristen Terrell. To the members of the board, I want to thank you for all of your time and consideration you have put into determining the best course of action for our school district this year. As a community member and a teacher, I am concerned about the outcomes of tonight's board meeting. I think the pressure of reopening schools is pushing you to make a decision to overturn your previous decision to wait until after fall break. Now that we have two different sets of benchmark data results to follow, we are muddying the water. I want to remind you that our district is open. We have students, teachers, and staff coming in all over the East Valley to our campuses, and our local families are not staying within their borders 100% of the time. Relying on the Maricopa County website to just focus on our school district is not an effective way to determine our potential risk to exposure. I hope that you consider reopening the schools tonight, that you will strongly consider a hybrid option if you choose to restart schools on September 8th. This will allow us to provide some form of social distancing, something that is not even remotely possible at full capacity, and it will ease our students and staff back into school, in-person school. If you look at the information coming from other states, school districts are experiencing unprecedented amounts of positive cases among their schools' communities within 15 days of schools reopening and are already being forced to shut schools down again. I hope that hybrid model will allow us to avoid this happening within the Higley to mitigate the risk to our students, teachers, and staff of contracting the virus. Utilizing a hybrid model through at least the end of the first quarter allow us to ease back into in-person learning and limit our risk to our community. Thank you for your time.
Melody Lenhart, Coronado, and Williamsfield. Since I can't appear in person to comment, I would just like the board members to have the opportunity to hear from me in writing here. It is imperative that we get our children back in school, the numbers supporting doing so. We've met the metrics and our kids are suffering through online school. The teachers have been amazing, but we can only do so much. While some children may do well with the format, others are experiencing constant failure, frustration, and poor grades to this learning format. There's absolutely no reason why public business like movie theaters, gyms, restaurants, etc. should be open for business, but our children still not able to attend in-person school with safety measures. It is appalling that the needs of our children in our community are being pushed to the bottom. As a society, we should put our children and their needs first. There should be no question about that. This should not be a political issue. This is about our children. This is about what our children need. They need an education. I've seen my children lose a great deal in math and writing skills in the time that they were out of school. And while it may have been necessary to do our best with less online education for a time, that time has clearly ended. It's time you vote to represent the parents in this school district who, in your own survey, overwhelmingly voted in support of sending their children to school quite some time ago. You were elected to represent the parents and children in this district. Please do so and allow them to return to school as soon as possible.
Kelly Stramillo, children at Higley Traditional Academy. With the reopening of gyms, theaters, and water parks, etc., wouldn't it make sense to delay reopening in-person discussion until October so we can see what happens to the numbers?
Heather Malman, Chaparral and Cooley Middle School. As an employee and a parent, I would like it known that I'm in full support of returning to on-campus learning. As a mother of 3 children in the district, 2 of which have learning disabilities, I know firsthand the struggles and anxiety and frustration that remote learning is causing them. Because of this, our family is strongly considering placing our children in private or charter schools. As an employee working with Title I students, they have expressed their strong desire to return to on-campus learning. They tell me that remote learning is hard, and my heart breaks for them when they don't get the support that they need and their teachers want to give them. As for the teachers and parents who do not want to return, thank you providing the options to work and learn from home. And for a majority of us that want to return, thank you providing the option to work and learn at school.
Kathleen Richards, children at Higley Traditional Academy. I'm deeply concerned that based on the board's agenda, the board seems to have decided to abandon their original metrics of positivity rates based on our county in favor of looking at the small Higley Unified School District area. We do not live in a world where looking at our rates at a small exclusive level makes any sense. Teachers are coming to classrooms from all over the valley. Students can opt into our district with open choice. While our Higley Unified School District numbers are low today, without waiting to see the impact of the opening of gyms, bars, theaters, and more, we cannot accurately assume safety for our students and teachers and staff. Consistently for our students is key. The board set up a start date, provided metrics are met and maintained of 10-12. This goal actually seems achievable as numbers continue to decline with minor fluctuations. However, if we contribute to the perfect storm of everything reopening at once, we are very likely to create an environment of increasing numbers which will require shutdowns and will create more chaos for our kids and teachers. I am deeply confused how the voices of the loudest and least connected are now seemingly detecting policy. These same voices have publicly declared that they send their children to school with varying symptoms with minimal impact. This cannot be acceptable moving forward. We cannot teach our children that we can manipulate data to achieve the outcomes a group seeks. We are in a pivotal moment where we can teach our children the important lesson of resilience, following facts and science, and that patience can pay off.
Kellen Escato, Cooley Preschool in Higley High. In reference to school returning, metrics are encouraging, but I feel there are still things to consider. I believe it would be prudent to wait to see the outcome of other districts. If we're able to remain face-to-face or return to online. As a teacher and mother, I find the week notice, if passes, very stressful to prepare. I am looking for returning, but more time is needed to prepare for another change.
Don Agbola, children at Gateway Point in Williamsfield. As of right now, there is already one teacher that I know that has had primary contact with COVID. According to the PowerPoint, this teacher would be allowed to come to school as long as they were asymptomatic, which would potentially expose any student they came in contact with. I am very concerned that sending my children back to school on September 8th would be too soon. One of the things that has helped my kids through remote learning is consistency. We have not yet addressed what will happen when a teacher or a student has to quarantine. Would there be the same sub for 10 days? Would there be a different sub in and out every other day? What if a teacher got COVID? Would the entire class have to wait 10 days to come back to school or be put through a COVID test? Would quarantining students be able to reach to remote learning for the period the time of with the teacher? Would they be doing online learning with a different teacher? With all these scenarios comes more inconsistencies, and we need more answers before the decision can be made. Please consider keeping this consistent and continue remote learning until at least October 12th. Thank you.
Wendy Haas, I teach at Chaparral. As a teacher in the district, I'm concerned about returning to school. Our class sizes have not gotten smaller. In fact, we have positive enrollment since the beginning of the school year, information shared at our Chaparral staff meeting yesterday. I currently have class sizes of the following: 29, 26, 27, 29, 26. I have double desks in my classroom, which means students sit side by side at a desk that measure 46 inches in length. So each student would have 23 inches of personal space with no barrier between them. I am physically unable to move the desks apart, and with the large class sizes, I will be filling all the desks in my room. I'm only able to distance the double desk 2 feet between in order to fit my 15 pairs of desks. The only PPE I've been given is a bottle of sanitizer, and in our staff bathroom we have a spray bottle labeled 710, no indication of what is in it. We were told to spray surfaces we touch while using the restroom. No indication of how long the surface must stay wet after we spray. I haven't heard any protocol for students' temperatures, illness checks. I haven't hear the plan for masks or what to do in a case the student refuses to wear a mask or comes to school with an inappropriate mask. Many parents online have been talking about bucking the system by sending schools in mesh masks that offer little to no coverage/protection. I have not had any updates on acceptable classroom activities. Can students talk to one another, move around the room, etc., which is worrisome as I tend to focus on very hands-on activities and I rely heavily on students working in groups for their learning. I don't know if students will have access to laptops in my room as technology was handed out to parents during the virtual learning. I'm concerned about the loss of instructional time if we have to transition between virtual and classroom learning. It takes a long time It takes a long time convert from online to in-person, and I imagine we will spend several days bringing kids up to speed that were unable to create things at home, interactive notebooks, printed assignments, etc. Thank you for listening to my concerns.
Stacy Abrilla, students at Bridges and Cooley. Good evening, members of the board. I would first like to express my gratitude to our district's teachers who continue to work harder than they ever have before for little pay, under extreme conditions and limited to no predictability. They truly are heroes and deserve much more respect, support, and pay. I have some concerns with respect to the agenda item 7.1. While it is true there are many opinions, as there are stars in the sky, about whether, when, and under what circumstances our district should return to in-person learning, I think we can all agree that honesty, transparency, and clear communication are imperative. It is with this in mind that I would like to point out the disingenuous characterization of the statutes of the benchmarks depicted in slide number 10 of tonight's presentation, which states all metrics were met on 8/20/2020. This is the first time all metrics were met. This statement is decidedly false. All three benchmarks have not been met for in-person learning for the county. Higley Unified School District boundaries, areas, and zip codes, or surrounding districts and zip codes, slides 4 through 7 clearly show that 2 metrics have been met for the county geographic area, and 2 have been met for the Higley Unified School District boundary area, and that the county health department currently recommends against in-person learning. It appears that the district is taking the position that for some metrics it will consider county-level metrics, and for other districts' level metrics. Apparently, whichever paints the rosiest picture. This despite the fact that the new cases per 100,000 population in the Higley Unified School District boundary area was 35.3, more than 3 times the benchmark. The percent of positivity rate for the county was 8.7, nearly double the benchmark. Some people may argue that this approach, and some may disagree. In any case, the board and the district's approach to interpreting and applying the data should be clearly stated, explained, and justified for its stakeholders. The statement on slide 10 and must be qualified to include the caveat that the metrics were met as of 8/20/2020 only when the data have been cherry-picked to suit the agenda. I recall certain board members empathetically stating during the August 8th board meeting that the county is large and we should not use county data to make local decisions when the data meant keeping schools closed. And yet the board is apparently prepared to apply a single county metric tonight rather than the local metric, but only if it means overriding the local metric in order to open schools for in-person learning. Either the county data apply or they don't. We don't get to rely on the data when it supports our position and ignore it when it doesn't. Thankfully, the metrics are heading in a desired direction, and perhaps by next week, this concern will be moot. However, I cannot emphasize enough that district leadership should be very careful about the way in which they communicate and depict data to the public. The board's 8/8/2020 resolution was that the return to school would be approved when the metrics are met. There is a valid argument to be made that metrics have not, in fact, been met, particularly given the County Department of Health clearly states on its dashboard that is the recommendation for Higley is hybrid learning and not in person. If the board wishes to disregard the Maricopa County Department of Public Health's recommendations, it should do so transparently and with honesty and integrity. If the board votes to reopen schools for in-person learning based on the metrics, then its members should explicitly state they are willing to defend their position that 35.3 cases per 100,000 population in the Higley Unified School District and surrounding areas is sufficiently low to begin in-person learning. It may very well be the right decision. Nevertheless, I implore you to be honest about the facts you use to justify your decision.
Ashley Booker, Santan Elementary. I wanted to share some positive feedback. Every board meeting, I feel like it's super negative from the public. I want you to know there are parents that support online learning. I know it's not ideal. However, I also know it won't last forever. Teachers and staff at Santan Elementary are amazing. They're always willing to jump on live meetings with me or my daughter if she's having trouble. I wish more parents would speak up to their children's teachers for additional help. We are parents. It's our job to make sure they get the best education. I'm sorry that some parents blame you all or the schools on the child's education when we should be the ones to speak up. Isn't the saying a closed mouth doesn't get fed? Thank you again for keeping our children and school staff safe by closing the schools until benchmarks are met. I'm sorry you were all put in this spot in the first place. Ashley Booker.
President Kaler and members of the board, that is the completion of the email.
Yeah.
Glyma Smith, Children at Bridges. It is mind-boggling you are going to send kids back to school in a week. There are two reasons why that is an uneducated decision. One, you originally planned for it to be on 10/12. We all understand, like anything, there was verbiage that read it could be sooner, but why not allow the COVID curve to continue to trend down for another month, as it's really not even another month before we have 2 weeks off for fall break. Two, does it make sense to send kids back to school when they go on break for 2 weeks? Wow, guess what people are going to do on the 2-week break? Social distance? Isn't the 10-12 plan making more sense now? Make sure the curve continues to lower by 10-12 and get the kids back to school then. We understand you have to deal with the politics from both sides. Act like you're not overreacting to that and plan for the kids to come back on 10-12. All it will take is one person in the district to get COVID, and your rush to change the current 10-12 date backfired on you bad. We love you guys. Make the right decision. Lead, don't follow. Please have the courage to read my email in tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take just a 5-minute break. Okay, we're back. And I move that we approve consent agenda item 6.1 to 6.7.
Second.
Any questions? Mr. Glover?
Thank you, Madam President. Item 6.5 is not a question, but somebody is making a very generous donation to Coronado PTO, and I don't want to mispronounce the name, but thank you very much to all the people who generously donate to Higley.
Absolutely. Do we know what that's going to go towards at Coronado? Do they have plans for that gift?
President Kaler, members of the board, we do not know what that's going to at this time. I can find out and put it in the superintendent's report.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Glover. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, we are moving on to 7.1 and an update on reopening of schools. Dr. Foley.
President Kaler, members of the board, tonight we have some updates that we'd like to provide for you. Let me just do a little overview of what we'll be talking about so that you will know what will be coming in this presentation. Tonight we're going to do a little update on the metrics that are available for us to talk about. We're also going to discuss the original resolution that was approved at the August 8th board meeting. We're going to talk about some health metrics and protocols. One of the things that we have discussed at many of our meetings are how are we going to communicate? What is the process for? And so we're going to go deeply into some of those aspects tonight. And we have Jillian Fulton here tonight who will be going through those with us. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about an example of the social emotional, because at our last meeting, we discussed the need for discussing what does that look like right now, because we know how important that is, but in the remote learning style. So we have a couple examples that we'd like to highlight for you tonight. So next slide. Okay, so one of the things we want to revisit, and we revisit, is the original governing board resolution that was approved at the August 8th meeting. And in that resolution, it prescribed the following: that the governing board approved the return to in-person teacher-led classroom instruction to begin on October 12th, 2020, or earlier if the Arizona Department of Health Services and the Maricopa County Health Department benchmarks and health metrics were met. We indicated in that it prescribed that we would at least give the community a 1-week return notice if they were met, and that we would reevaluate them at each scheduled governing board meeting. So let us talk a little bit about the dashboard and metrics that we are referring to. So when we first met on that August 8th meeting, the document itself had just come out. It had just come out for the executive order from the governor, and he had promised this dashboard. So we've now had this dashboard for 3 weeks. One of the things that we studied deeply in this document was not only what the dashboard looked like, but what were the considerations that we had to have for offering in-person instruction. And it had the benchmarks being cases, percent positivity, and COVID-like symptoms. It also indicated that in addition, that local health departments may modify a specific benchmark, because at that point, the Maricopa County specific dashboard had not yet been created, because it came the following week. It's important to remember that when we're looking at these metrics, that they are on a delayed schedule. So for instance, what we're looking at for the data that was released on August 20th, 2020, those are for the time period of July 26th through August 8th. So it's important to remember that the update we get is substantially delayed in the dashboard, so it's from weeks before. It's also important to remember that as a district, we've been monitoring on what's available. What do our local areas look like daily so that we have some idea of what do the numbers look like that might be in the windows that may come out on the metric. So obviously, it's important to remember that those are delayed. So when we looked at our Arizona Department of Health Services dashboard this week, and what's interesting too is they both come out at different times. The Arizona Department of Health Services benchmark usually updates about 9 o'clock, and literally we're sort of sitting there going, refresh, 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 because that's when it updates. So the good news is that we see trends going in positive directions. They're going down, which is a good thing. You'll see that on this dashboard that the first one, it's either one or the other, a decline in cases or less than 100 per 1,000 individuals. And so on this Arizona Department of Health Services dashboard, it shows that we met the first one, the decline in cases. It shows that we did not meet on the Arizona Department of Health Services benchmark the 1 for percent positivity. We see it's going down, but we have not met that on this dashboard, and that for 2 consecutive weeks, the COVID-like illness again continues to go down. So when we first created this resolution, we did not have the other dashboard, but you'll notice that in our resolution, we had identified, because we had been a part of a webinar that had indicated that Maricopa was going to be following on the heels of it. And as was sort of indicated in that first document, you can use parts and pieces of this to help understand where your community is at to help guide in decision making. So, next slide. So the Maricopa County dashboard, it was the one that came out that's more specific, zip code, school district, area. So it takes Maricopa County as a whole and breaks it down. What was interesting is the first week we were one of the first that was yellow. Remember that the lagging weeks data, this is almost 3-week-old data. So it's continuing to give us it will kind of continue to give us a backstory of where we were. You'll see that from the first week to the second week, again, the other one has been available for 3 weeks, this has been available for 2, that we're continuing to improve. So when we take a look, next slide, when we take a look at the original document that says these are the metrics we are looking at, and these are the dashboards. We are looking between 2 dashboards here, and we're monitoring that. So you can see that on the cases one, that when we look at that data, that was met on the Department of Health Services metric this week. Next slide. For the positivity, you'll see that this one, while we did not meet that on the Department of Health Services, we did meet it for the percent positivity indicator, while that was one of the ones that was green. So again, for just that metric, that we met that for that metric on the on the Higley specific one from Maricopa County. And then the COVID-like illness, we have met that one on both dashboards. So when we take a look at, next slide, again, you've heard that we have 2 different metrics that we have been looking, 2 different dashboards we're looking at, the 3 metrics. And so this would have been the very first week where, utilizing those specific metrics between those 2 dashboards, we would have had a green in each of those areas. So next slide.
Well, let's not pass by that too fast, please, because I have the same concerns that a great many people raised about this. And taking the best score is one thing, and combining them that doesn't mean the same thing. And I think our teachers are not fooled by this. They know data, and if you have a kid that's getting a C first quarter and then gets an A second quarter, you might give the kid an A. But you might also give them a B. And so I really am not a big fan of this particular slide, and I'm glad to hear that our teachers didn't receive it that way either. I think it's important, and when we talked about these, we did not know, we had a notion that they might be able to be broken down by school district, but we didn't know that for a fact, and none of us were betting on it.
Right.
So this, to me, is really, I don't want to rely that we're all in the green here. And then the other thing is, if you were, you don't have to, but if you were to back up a few slides, there's three colors really. You've got green and yellow and red. And the research that is telling us where we are, that's yellow, is giving us some guidance from experts that is contrary to the full blast 100% in-person return. And I'm going to just point that out. And some of the other numbers that the state has decided to use, just by way of comparison, like the cases per 100,000 people, it's cool. I mean, I was thrilled to see that Higley was where it was when those were released. I was surprised. I didn't have that information. I didn't know that. So that's awesome. And I hope our community continues to do the right things to make it go down. But when you talk about 35 cases per 100,000 people, the schools like in Germany that opened, were between like 0.something% and under 3 per 100,000. So our numbers are still high. And, even when you say one of the metrics is like, well, it just has to get lower. All right, cool. We got 1 million cases. Now we only have 900,000. That's lower. That meets the metrics. So, a grain of salt, but kudos to our teachers for calling out that chart, because I saw that and I had great issues with the fact that you really, it's got to be green, in my opinion, and not one or the other. And cherry picking really does set you up. And you guys can comment. I'm sure people disagree with me, but I didn't want to let that pass without supporting some of
President Kaler, Board Member Glover, I understand exactly what you're saying. I believe and I understand where our community and teachers are also concerned. Again, we are providing just an update on where we were with those metrics, and I understand those concerns and questions that have been brought forward. So next slide. Thus, if you choose to interpret utilizing both metrics or both dashboards, if you're using both dashboards or metrics from each one, if you were to look at it that way, we could consider that the metrics were met. For the first time, we saw greens on 8/20. Again, the projections looking at, again, we won't know until tomorrow at either 9 or 4, but when we're looking at what our data looked like at those weeks that they will be pulling from, the projections look like they'll continue to go down. If they were to meet again on the 27th and the 3rd, if we were to go back to the resolution and choose to use both dashboards to make that recommendation, and we could choose not to do that as well, but if we were to do so, it would mean that if we were to pull them from that way, the first time that we would have met them and allow more than a 1-week notice would be on September 8th. So tonight, one of the things that you will be determining on, and again, going back to, we can interpret which dashboards we're using and if we want to use them for different metrics or not, absolutely. But there would be a recommendation for adherence to the resolution where we would utilize both dashboards for those specific indicators, and if with that updated information, that you could consider in-person teacher-led instruction to begin on September 8th, 2020, if the public benchmark metrics continue to be met. And again, going back to determining which dashboard and metric pieces we would utilize as part of that decision to consider.
Mr. Glover, I agree with a lot of things that you just said. My concern in reference to, as they say, we're cherry picking, I understand completely what they're saying in reference to this. As we're looking at the data starting on 9/8, maybe when that time comes to have that conversation, but I just want to throw it out now. The statistics are going to be released tomorrow, okay? And then they're going to be released again on September 3rd, again on Thursday. If we're looking at something like this, I just want to throw this out. I would feel more comfortable that we're going to look at the statistics for tomorrow, and then we're going to look at the statistics for next Thursday. And if everything is going somewhat good, we'll see a decrease in the next 2 reporting, and then we'll look, then I would be more comfortable with even considering opening it up on the 8th. So I don't know if for us to have a board meeting on that Thursday night and say, okay, guys, a Thursday night, this is what the stats look like for this Thursday, this will look Thursday, and then somebody's got a green across the board on these benchmarks, then we're going to be okay. I mean, if there's going to be, as we talk about, we see other school districts around here opening up, this is going to give us these 2 weeks to say, okay, what's going on around the neighboring community here? Is things starting to happen? So, but we have the chance to come together as a board on that Thursday night, that 3rd, to say, look at the numbers have changed. We need to take a step back before we decide opening up on the 8th. But maybe when that time comes during our meeting when we talk about where we're at. But I just wanted to throw that out right now as for some discussion in reference to looking at the statistics from the next 2 times that are taking place.
Mr. Glover, can I ask you a question? Or Mr. Ratovich, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm like, if you were thinking of that, would you still want us to go back on the 8th? That would only give teachers 5-ish days to prepare?
I guess what my thought is, and we can have this conversation, is to go through with thinking about the 8th, but us as a board are going to look at the statistics tomorrow, and we're going to come together on that Thursday the 3rd to say, okay, is this going to be a go? In reference to that.
Sorry, so only giving the teachers 5 days notice and the community 5 days? That's the
understand
question.
that.
Yeah,
I understand
that's the
that.
question I'm
Maybe we
trying to
should
make
look
you
at the
like
14th,
start thinking.
but
Yeah,
maybe the 14th.
that's something to think about if you're
Yes.
and mentally
yes,
as we go through this slide that
Yes.
only gives them 5 days and really over a long weekend.
Right.
So that might be very difficult.
Right. Maybe we might want to look at the 14th instead. But I just wanted to throw that out for conversation.
President Kaler, members of the board, I think it's really important to remember that these are brand new metrics that we have only had for the last 3 weeks that came out to us. And again, we've had these tools, we're interpreting them as we go. This is something that, again, we are going to use information, but again, these are new tools that are again on delayed data that gives us an indicator. And again, the projections are looking like we may be green this week on the Maricopa Higley specific, but again, we're going to know more tomorrow. So again, there's lots to consider here, and one of the things that we hear is so important is understanding this is a time with what is our health and safety protocols and how are we going to help support teachers and our community and our staffs and our buildings to understand what does this look like. So next slide here. We're going to do a little update here that is really important for everyone to hear because there are some things that are mandated from Maricopa County Health Department and that we need to be sure everyone understands. But we're going to kind of go into the conversation of the role of masks, the wearing of masks, the difference between primary and secondary contacts. What does the communication structure look like with families when there is concern about health? And we're going to give some scenarios so that we're hoping that we can answer some questions and clarify some information. And because there are some differences here that are important for you and everyone to understand. And these are things that are also response to the state level directive, not just Higley specific. And so we're kind of wanting to go into some of those details tonight.
President Kaler, members of the board, Dr. Thomason, members of cabinet. I'm Jillian Fulton, the district nurse. I have a health process update tonight. The first slide up, we're looking at the risk assessment. Of course, we know that masks are mandatory. And I found this image that I thought depicted that very well. You have on the very top your high transmission probability. Those are 2 people that are not wearing masks. In the middle, you have your low transmission probability. 1 person is wearing one is not. And at the bottom, lowest transmission probability, both people would be wearing a mask.
Ms. Bolton, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, and I apologize for the interruption. I was just reading the CDC, some CDC stuff this morning, and one statistic that really stuck out, and I just want to bring it to the community and everybody else, and you can feel free to correct me if I have erred, but 50% of the transmissions occur before symptoms occur, and I think that's really worth putting a lot of thought into. And then as I have this sense that our teachers are very concerned, and rightfully so, about their health and the things that they might be bringing home to their loved ones, the idea of getting tested. So yesterday I got home from work. I'm also a teacher, and I've been in schools. And I got home from work, and I thought, I should really got to probably put my money where my mouth is. So I went online, and I found at Chandler Gilbert Community College, because the governor has said, he'll help us with these testing blitzes, and he'll help schools. But I did talk to Dr. Thomason about it, and they said, well, there's just one at Chandler Gilbert, so you're probably not going to get one in Higley, and that's fine. So I thought, well, I'll check this out. It's after school. Anyway, I got 4:15 or so. I got online to put in my name, and by 4:55 I was there, and they had stuck a Q-tip up my nose for 5 seconds. It wasn't bad at all, in and out. And I have insurance, but if I hadn't had it, and there's no copay, no billing, I'll never notice it. But if I didn't have it, they would have tested. And so that got me thinking, we should, to make our teachers feel better, we could have the community's help, because we have all these kids, people running around possibly that are not showing any signs, that if we could just encourage them somehow, maybe through ours, to get tested. It's not mandatory, or maybe find a day of the week, maybe where it's early release, and just say to teachers, okay, get out of here, go get tested. And I think those things would help alleviate some concerns and maybe get people thinking okay, maybe now we have some real data and some real numbers, and we can move forward. So I didn't know where I was going to shove that in there, but I wanted to mention that for the community. The testing couldn't have been easier. I felt like it was 1970s American healthcare. I went, I got what I needed, it was timely, and I was in and out, and it didn't cost me anything at all. So anyway, thank you for indulging.
President Kaler, Board Member Glover, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead, I didn't realize you were talking. I'm not going to change your statistic. You're right. And I have noticed that there are many more resources lately about testing and the availability as well, and places that are opening up to do that. So I think that's a great idea.
Lastly, they're open 24 hours, which is amazing.
I think that even our friends at Queen Creek did kind of a testing blitz right before their schools open on the weekend. And then ASU, I got the numbers today because my daughter attends ASU, and they tested over 31,000 students before they were allowed on campus, and 161 tested positive. So those were really low, which I was very encouraged by. So I'm hoping, because I have a daughter there, that she continues to stay healthy and well. But they're following some very strict guidelines on masks on the campus, even outside walking to class. So anyways, I did see that too, Mr. Glover.
And masks are definitely one of the most important subjects that we'll be covering in all of the health updates. The primary versus secondary contact, again, it all comes down to masks. Primary, you may be considered a close contact of someone with COVID-19 if you were exposed to the sick person for more than 15 minutes and within 6 feet or less, you live in the same household, neither person was wearing a mask. Secondary contact, you may be considered a secondary contact of someone with COVID-19 if you were not directly exposed to the sick person for more than 15 minutes and within 6 feet or less, one person was wearing a mask. I also want to include that all facts are considered, each individual case is completely different, and all of those facts are taken into consideration when we're looking at that. This is the HUSD COVID-19 Health Office protocol that was put together. And this is what our health aides are using in all of the health offices when we are looking at students that are coming in with potential symptoms, and the flow sheet that we're going down when we're looking at that. You'll notice at the very top in the red, if anyone enters the health office with COVID-19 symptoms, you have to wear your PPE. That includes your mask, face shield, gloves, and gown. That is a health department requirement, and that's something that we're doing regardless. The purpose of this flowchart is to help the health office go down and monitor the symptoms, look at underlying conditions, anything that we can rule out if we need to talk to parents before we go all the way down. You'll see the very first thing we're doing is assessing the symptoms. From that, we're going down. If they have symptoms, we're isolating them, we're contacting their parents, we're contacting site admin, we're sending them home with the exclusion guidelines. We're also, I just want to be very sure that everybody knows we are looking at pre-existing conditions. That has come up often, and it's very important. So, next slide. This is our student COVID-19 exclusion guidelines. This is specific to students. You can see at the top we have the symptoms outlined. They go home if they are displaying one symptom. We're excluding asymptomatic students who have had positive COVID-19 tests or live with someone diagnosed with COVID-19. And we're excluding siblings of students who have had a positive COVID-19 test. That green and blue box below is outlining if they have a COVID diagnosis, symptomatic, asymptomatic. Below that, the COVID symptoms have not been evaluated by a healthcare provider. That's giving the guidance of what we would do there. And below that, the no symptoms and lives with a person diagnosed with COVID-19 or primary exposure. Next is the employee COVID-19 exclusion guidelines. These mirror the same as the student at the top with the symptoms and the positive and diagnosis, and then the healthcare provider. What you're going to see that does not mirror below that is no symptoms and lives with a person diagnosed with COVID-19 or primary exposure. We have continue working and monitor for symptoms. If symptoms develop within 14 days of exposure, they will go on quarantine according to the Maricopa County Department of Public Health quarantine guidelines. The next slide is student versus employee primary exposure to positive cases. Like you just saw those slides before, the students will follow the student HUSD exclusion guidelines. The employees will follow the employee HUSD exclusion guidelines. Educational workers are considered essential employees and can go to work after primary exposure if they are asymptomatic and wear masks. They continue working and monitor their symptoms, and if symptoms develop, they will go on a 14-day quarantine with the Maricopa Department of Public Health. The process for exposure and positive cases. I am working on a training. I'm going to be filming a video for our employees and our admin, and it's checklists for students, and there's 4 of those. They're going to look like exposure for an employee, exposure for a student, a positive case for an employee, and a positive case for a student, and that will go down and follow that process, and it brings us down to the same guidelines that I just shared with you. And that will be a training for the employees as well. Confidentiality. Who needs to know identifying information? The district nurse, school health aide, school site administrator, and human resources. It's very important to remember the confidentiality. I think this is huge, and it will be included in the training that I do in that video as well. Lack of confidentiality, there's federal laws, there's state laws, we do have HIPAA, we have FERPA. I was just on a webinar with the health department today with them reiterating the importance of that. So that's very, very important, and the potential discipline for anybody involved in violating the confidentiality. When and who will be notified of a positive case? General, anytime there's a positive COVID-19 case, families connected to the grade or scheduled classes will be notified by email with a positive COVID-19 case on campus communication. For primary contacts, if you are identified as a primary contact, the district will work in conjunction with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health Services, who will call you or instruct an appropriate district personnel to call you. HUSD will also send a letter via email. Secondary contacts will not be notified directly unless the Maricopa County Department of Public Health advises HUSD to notify. Notification to HUSD families. For primary contacts, again, they'll be notified by email with the primary contact of awareness exposure communication, phone call from the Maricopa Department of Public Health Services or HUSD employee, and will result in a need to quarantine. For secondary contacts, they'll be notified through the email positive case on campus. For kindergarten through 6th grade, that will be grade level. And for 7th through 12th grade, that would be the class participants, so based off of that student's schedule. And they will not result in a need to quarantine. Again, facts that go into every single case, but in general speaking.
I do have a question in reference to the primary contact. With secondary students, they're in a classroom, they change classes, and every day they're sitting around different people in that same class. So how are we going to decide if there's no seating assignment for that particular class, and I come into this math class every day, and there is somebody that tests positive, how are we going to know who are the primary contacts with those students sitting next to that student if they change every day? Because I think we said how many days it takes, like 4 or 5 days or something, before somebody,
So
Just a
President Kaler and Board Member
Yeah.
Butovich, so there's a tab in Synergy, that's our data system that we have for the district. And in there is a tracing tab. And so if I go in there and I type in the student's ID number or their name or whichever I use, it outlines the entire student's schedule for that day and where they were and what students were in that class. So for example, I tested it and I put a student in from one of the high schools and I had the exact number, but 165 students that were connected to that student that would get that notification. Yes. The next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead of you. The notification to HUSD employees. The primary contacts will be notified by email with a primary contact of awareness of exposure and communication, phone call from the Maricopa Department of Public Health Services or HUSD employee, and will result in a need to quarantine if symptomatic. Secondary contacts will be notified through email with a positive case on campus and will not result in a need to quarantine.
So, Mrs. Fulton, basically, just to kind of bottom shelf it, in a class, if the child has been wearing their mask the whole time and there's a positive case, that person is considered a secondary.
Correct.
Is that correct? So it really goes to the mask wearing, whether you are a primary versus a secondary. And so you'll be notified through an email, but that doesn't mean that student has to go quarantine. But if that student chose not to wear a mask or didn't for some reason, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. That person would have to go quarantine because they would be primary. Correct?
Yes, President Kaler, and so again, all those facts. And so, for example, in your example, if we had a classroom and every student was wearing a mask, they're all going to be secondary. If one student takes their mask off, but every other student is wearing their mask, that's where the health department and I sit down and literally conversations come down to how long was the mask off? How long were they in the classroom before the mask came off? Who else was in the classroom? Where were they before that? When did they, every situation boils down to that mask. So in general, to answer your question, they would be secondary contacts, but there's always things that play into it that I couldn't guarantee that would be the case.
So to follow up on that question, whose responsibility is in the classroom to keep tabs that the masks are on and for what amount of time, et cetera, et cetera? So if somebody says on a certain day, this student tested positive, so is the teacher supposed to be writing this down every day? So-and-so took off the mask for 10 minutes? I mean, who's going to keep track of this? And to add this to the teachers, in addition to cleaning the classroom and wiping the desk, to testing to see who's keeping their mask on, if you could tell me who's going to keep track of. So if you call this classroom, there was a positive test in the certain classroom, and for the secondary and primary, who's going to show you the numbers and said, okay, these two students took the mask off? Who's going to give you, I guess, how are we going to do that?
President Kaler and Board Member Wojtovich, I will tell you that everybody is very alert on who does not have a mask on at all times. And will that change? Maybe, but right now, they can identify exactly who's not wearing a mask. And there's a lot of remediation there of put your mask on, let's put your mask on. And that's going to be what happens. As far as who's monitoring it in the classroom, it will be the teacher. I guess I'm kind of speaking a little bit for myself, thinking about past conversations, and Dr. Foley can step in, but there's discussion, you have the teacher reminding the student, you have, if that student still won't wear it, you have admin come in and help talk to the student about the importance and education of wearing the mask and what that does. More than likely, we'll need to talk to the parents and have them on board too. I mean, it's a team effort.
President
assuming-
Kaler, Board Member Wojtovich, that's one of the most important parts about this is the mask, mandatory mask wearing, and that there be scheduled breaks or places where masks are removed where we can ensure physical distancing, because really wearing the mask at all times in places where we cannot physically distance is the difference between a primary and secondary contact. And so hence it's going to be really important that's why it's a policy that we adhere to. We talked about the fact that only a IEP or 504 trumps a policy for that, because quite honestly, that this is such an important part of us having a safe classroom environment is ensuring that wearing that mask is in place. It's essential.
I'm assuming that we are trying that, like, we're kind of getting a test run of this in support services, and that's how you guys are speaking. Like, how Mrs. Fulton has said that they're reminding the kids to put it on, and I'm assuming that's because of support services. Am I correct? This is what's happening in support service, like when we're doing support services, right? Okay.
President Kaler, Board Member Wilson, yes, support services have been a great trial run for masks, and I will tell you that one of the things we've been proud of is our littlest wearers of the masks do a very good job. One of the things we actually had a conversation with our principals earlier this week was there's the health assistant on campus is required to wear, substantial gear, from a mask to a shield to almost a hood. And a principal was saying to us, actually what the requirement of this was startling and frightening to a student. And we talked about that there's going to be a great deal of learning that has to happen, just like when we did fire safety with our youngest learners, being not afraid of the firefighter who's coming in to help you in this gear, but how important wearing our gear is to protect us and each other. And the quality of masks and our social and appropriate responsibilities for wearing those masks. When explained to our youngest learners, and again, etiquette about not touching it as often, or all those things are part of the learning that goes along with this. But when explained to and explicitly taught to our youngest learners, that they are very receptive and very good about adhering to it. Yes, we've had reminders and we've had learning opportunities, but again, we've been pleasantly pleased with how our students have done. We may need to do some reminders for our adults about wearing it over our noses, but other than that, we've seen in a trial run in our support services the mask mandate. And again, we have situations in special educations and self-contained classrooms where there are IEP health reasons these students are not able to do that. And there are protocols that are being put in those classrooms in order to adhere and accommodate appropriately there.
And just to address, I know as a board, we have chosen to sit apart. We have chosen to keep us spaced apart. And so that rule has been very clear to us in this boardroom that we don't have to put our mask on because we are more than 6 feet apart from everybody. But the moment we walk around in this room, everybody puts their mask on. We use the restroom, everybody has their mask on. The district office, every time I've come in, everybody has their masks on. So that is definitely the policy that we are following even here in our boardroom.
Going to the theme of responsibility and understanding, one of the things that will happen is when in-person learning it resumes, there will be an acknowledgement form that will be electronic through parent view and in follow-up in paper if needed, with an understanding for parents to understand how important their knowledge of the health, safety, sanitation, and their students' health wellness is to the safety of all. That visitors will be discouraged on campus, that face coverings are going to be required. And if a face covering isn't a mask, it could be a face shield, but your child will have to wear a face covering because it comes down to that face mask being the difference between quarantining or monitoring. It really matters, and strict adherence to that is going to be really important. This idea of these daily screening health protocols that your child is symptom-free. Yep, we do know that asymptomatic is possible, hence the wearing of the mask and the hand sanitation and physical distancing where masks are off at lunchtime, and all those things are going to be essential and important, and there's going to be processes and protocols that have to be followed on campuses to ensure that we are as safe as possible, and that ongoing communication about any health issues will be expected. For instance, if your child does come to school and your child does have a symptom that is concerning, that your child needs to go home, just like it says on those exclusion guidelines, for 10 days. And now again, you can come with a negative COVID test, just like Board Member Glover was talking about, but sometimes it can take a few days to get those results. But again, we're going to be taking health and safety very seriously because it's important for us to be able to if we return to in-person learning, it won't be business as usual without new protocols and processes in place to ensure safety and wellness where possible. Now, one of the things we have been very direct about from the get-go is that physical distancing is not always going to be possible. That is one of the mitigation factors that we know. We know that hand sanitization, that masks, that physical distancing are all essential and very, very, very important. But the wearing of the mask is going to be essential when we cannot physically distance. So there will be an acknowledgement form that will be part of awareness for our community, as well as conversations that happen with students about what this looks like in the classroom and their responsibilities too. Now, does that mean that it will be perfect? Does that mean that everyone will adhere to it at all times? No, this is going to be an ongoing new reality for us when we return to in-person learning. And adherence to that will help make sure we are able to stay in in-person learning.
At which point during any of this how are we going to educate our students about this? I mean, the importance, are we going to have some YouTube videos for them to watch, the first couple days of school, and to say, okay, you need to put a mask on, this is how you put it on. I was watching one the other day. We touch our face 16 times an hour, okay? And they were showing, even with your mask on at 16 times an hour, you still have germs up here and everywhere else. And it was quite interesting to watch some of these videos that some school districts are showing, that even with children washing their hands, they were missing the top section and things like that. So they were educating through videos the correct way to wash, how to put the mask on. And it's important that we all are getting the same message to everybody on our campuses, and perhaps through a YouTube video or something. But I think we need to all have the same message and how to do this. And if we're going to get through this, we need to come together as a group. And I think it's important, the more things that we do to make it fun for our students, educate them with the bubble man or whatever we need to do, but we need to get the information out, and it needs to be the same information at all our campuses.
Yeah.
President Kaler, Mrs. Fulton, I saw the same mask picture that you shared with us at a Banner Health asthma office. And I actually took a picture of it. I found it to be very informative, and it helps explain the importance of the mask. And Dr. Foley, I know you mentioned this just now, is that we know physical distancing isn't going to be available in lots of our areas. And both the CDC and the Arizona Department of Health Services and Maricopa County Health. I mean, you put all these health services in, and their recommendation is a mask when physical distancing isn't possible. So knowing that physical distancing is not going to be possible in our classrooms all the time, in our hallways and things like that. In some areas, we might be able to spread out a little bit more and have that physical distancing, be able to take that mask break and things like that. But I know we heard multiple times in our public comment tonight the concern about the physical distancing, and that is why the masks are so important. We recognize that if we could physical distance through the recommendation, then that would obviously be ideal, but it's not available in our industry. It's not available in our schools. So those masks are going to be very important. And I agree, Mr. Ratovich, we need to make sure that we're trying to share with our parents how important it is, how to properly wash your hands, how to properly put your masks on, and do what we can to do that properly. And the sooner we can communicate that and get our families hopefully working with it. I know it was mentioned at our previous board meeting, and I know I saw lots of things out there where it's like working on having my kid wear a mask, and I've seen lots of pictures even through the meltdowns of the remote learning, but they're getting their kids to wear the masks during remote learning to get used to it. So thank you for sharing that, and I think that that's a great visual on how how important it does prevent the spread of this virus.
President Kaler, thank you. Well, thank you both for your comments. And Mr. Ratovich, I having been and seen around some kids that have gone back to schools, I'm impressed with how well they're doing. I really expected to hear a lot like, put your mask on, put your mask on, put your mask on. The kids were really good. They were really good. And sometimes kids are the best of us and kind of sometimes show us how we should behave. But if now's maybe a time, if you want to go back, I mean, for me, I have looked at the hybrid model. I think it matches what some of the guidance has said. If you absolutely must go back, short term, I would like to watch other people make any possible mistakes rather than our kids. I understand that's wildly unpopular and would be extremely crazy for everyone. But you can establish some routines. The kids can learn, if they're at a new school, they can learn the new school. But limiting the numbers in tight spaces, I think, is so very important. And then there's things like the desks are not going to be set up the way that we're used to. The drinking fountains are probably going to be covered, and maybe every other table, and the lunch tables. You can't sit right next to your buddy anymore. We got to get a little used to that. And so, at 100% full capacity, ASAP, full speed, I'd rather have a little time to adapt to that. But anyway, this presentation, I don't think this is not a bag, but just some data. You need some data, so I want to throw some numbers out. Since August, over 70,000 children in the United States have tested positive for COVID, a 21% increase. I think that's important to know. There's been a sharp rise since July. The last 2 weeks of July, 97,000 kids under age 19 tested positive. The American Academy of Pediatrics, which people like to throw at us, released a report at the end of July. And guess which state had more COVID cases per 100,000 than any other state in the country? Yes, Arizona, you've got it right. There's about 1,098 per 100,000 children. We are worse or better, depending on your perspective. We're worse than Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and that is not great company. Arizona has the highest positivity rate for kids at 17.8%. So those are numbers that I feel like we kind of need to make some decisions. So I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone.
I'm just going to say, though, I did read to some of those exact numbers, Mr. Glover, but I do believe the one that with the Academy of Pediatrics, they only took 9 states total. it wasn't all 50 states that they came up with that number. I kind of read that later on, but I did see the same articles that you are referring to.
President Kaler, members of the board, one of the things that we've had a theme that we were talking about at several of our meetings, and it was asked for us to come back, is a little bit about social emotional and how are we connecting with kids, because we know how important this is. You know what, our teachers are amazing and they love their kids and we want to connect with them, and sometimes it's hard to do that, and they have been very creative and have come up with different ways to do that. So we wanted to highlight the work of a couple teachers here on ways that they have been connecting with students in remote learning, and they've got some great things happening that connect with the great social and emotional support. Again, it's hard to replace what can happen in the classroom, but what we're doing is extending to bring the connection through that screen and connecting with individuals in ways that are a little unique. And our students have done some neat work in their class. So we're just going to share a couple examples. Again, just a highlight of some of the many things that our teachers are doing with our students in the area of connecting and building relationships with them at this time.
So, President Kaler, members of the board, this for me is a success story for sure. So when our kids work with us remotely, in person, or eventually online here, we're not just developing academics with these kids. There's this whole other side, and we call it that social emotional component. I like to think of this as the real life skills. These are the skills you need to survive as an adult. So some of those things include managing your emotions, setting and achieving goals, developing empathy, and the capacity to build those positive relationships with others. So next slide, please. Sunny Braxima is one of our sixth grade teachers, and she was gracious enough to share this example, and I thought about it for a while because all of us could probably write a diary since March because that's when it really impacted us here. And so she's stretching her kids to think deeply and share what's been going on with them. She told me today how much the kids are missing school and how they look forward to Wednesdays and they want to talk about it all the time. So these are some of the questions that she's challenged our kids with. How has your life changed? For all of us, there are a lot of talking points, data points, changes. Some things might have been positive. And I can sit here right now and say our kids have grown through this. Their technology skills, their ability to persevere, problem solve in spite of adversity. But then there are those challenges, or those changes that none of us were prepared for. So I love the fact that she's getting them to talk about their feelings. She told me, you know, some of them are saying, I'm getting headaches. Oh, me too. Or I have anxiety and I'm worried. Oh, me too. So this, to me, is one of the best things we've been doing. It's such an uncertain time, and our kids, I guess, unfortunately or fortunately, are developing some lifelong skills or some grit, maybe earlier than we would have wanted them to go through this, but there are positive points. When I met with my elementary team this week, we said we've got to keep doing this. When we get back in person, we'll do it in person and online, and should we stay remote, we'll continue. So next slide, please. So it is a critical time in history, and I always think about where I was on 9/11. I can tell you exactly what was happening and all the emotion and how it impacted me as a teacher and what I did with that. And life's really never been the same since then. And I don't think life's ever going to be the same after COVID. But we're learning through it, and our teachers are like actually enjoying this time in the week. So the next slide, please. So this isn't separate from thinking and writing and communicating. It's all combined. And so she's using Microsoft Teams as a platform for sharing. And it was kind of fun because Mr. Lotzenhauser and I were talking about some of the similarities between elementary and secondary and how they're approaching this. But I think it's kind of fun to step back and say, yay, something's going well.
So, President Kaler, members of the board, I'd like to highlight something that Mr. Dolan and the staff at Sussman Middle School are doing, where they're using a program where they're giving small lessons on the Wednesdays to all of their students, and they've called it SHIELD. And so, as you can see, Student Hour for Individual Emotional Learning and Development, and they started this last week. And so they're once again going through some social emotional components with their kids on a school-wide basis and allowing them to have some opportunities to once again talk about some of the issues that they're going through. Next slide, please. So this is just the first one that they did last week, and as all of you are familiar with, stress, we are taking a look at that and defining stress for the kids and having them put that within their own words. And once again, these are all the teachers spread out in terms of a certain period, and that's what they're dealing with all of their kids going through. So the first one was to explain stress. Next slide, please. Once again, just trying to help them identify, and I think when you're doing this, it's finding similarities, that you're not alone, that if you're feeling these kinds of things, there are a lot of people that are feeling these kinds of things. And once again, with Mrs. Richards and I were comparing, we thought, wow, that's very similar to a lot of the themes that were happening from her examples are the themes that are happening with us as well. Next slide, please. So they talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how we're supporting them on the bottom two, but how can we help them support themselves and grow through this hierarchy? And it's introducing these students to these ideas. And so hopefully we're continuing to work with them to get up to that blue self-actualization peak. Next slide, please. And what I really liked at the end here is how they finished this first lesson was tell us what you want to talk about. So it's some ownership from the student perspective, like, hey, I'm concerned about, maybe I need to talk more about anxiety or continue on with stress or what other topics. And so this is going to be a continuous theme at the campus about how they can support the students, whether it's remotely or whether it's in person. And so just another example, I think, from what our district is doing, and a wonderful job. And kudos to the teachers and Mr. Dolan for helping put together this program to support the kids there.
Will this spread to the other campuses?
You know, each principal's looking at different things individually.
Okay, they're looking at something, because
yes,
it has been a theme, not this week in our board comments, but I think 2 weeks ago, that the social and emotional learning was a big deal for our parents. And so I just want to make sure that all campuses are going to get something or work towards something.
Yes, and when we meet as a group, we share our ideas, because the counseling departments have stepped up with Canvas pages and different things to provide resources and different structures. So we do like to share and steal from each other.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Mrs. Wilson.
In the comments today, we heard about PPE not being available. Could you speak to that a little?
President Kaler, Board Member Wilson, yes, I'm going to ask Dr. Fowler to come out here so that he can address some of those questions. And he's in the back and has been made aware of the concerns. So I'll have him switch places here so that he can speak to that directly.
President Kaler, members of the board, would you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
There were some did you get to hear board comments at all?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And I was surprised by the comments. There was a couple related to PPE. And so the only item that I'm aware of that we haven't received was plexiglass, which we did have a supply of plexiglass, but that was limited right now. So we did get plexiglass installed in all of our front offices and still working through some of the local areas to get more, but that was one area. But that doesn't really fall under the PPE. I know wipes were limited, although we did receive a supply of those this past week. And so we're really stocked in all the PPE areas, face masks, and we know the teacher boxes that we went over a while back. We have all those supplies in, and those items are being deployed. So I wasn't
The
privy
one
to
quote
what
was
specifically they were talking
sanitation station, and I'm not quite sure what that meant, but they said sanitation station. Do you-
hand sanitizers.
Okay, that's hand sanitizer.
So
like
we
against
did
the wall?
have those set up with the hand sanitizer on tables and sites, and then just this past week also the Purell ones that attach to the wall had arrived. So I think we have a number of those that have been distributed, and so that's in process, and we're continuing to reach out and gather more PPE, and so we do have a supply in all of those key areas. So I do think, maybe a month ago there was some areas that we were looking for, excuse me, but our supply is stocked.
Thank you.
So in reference why we're talking about supplies, so the box that we saw at the last board meeting, all the teachers will be having those in their classrooms, the supplies that are necessary?
President Kaler, Mr. Tovich. In fact, yes, the box was a temporary. We actually have a special, it's a blue bag with a Higley logo on it that is going to house all of those. And those were and are in process and being delivered out to the sites and put together. So yes, every single teacher will have all of those items. And we're, going to keep those replenished and working with each sites to make sure that all of those supplies are replenished when they're needed.
So if we have the box, do we have a guidebook? So this box isn't just sitting on my desk, and does each school have guidelines, like what's going to take place and what you need to do at certain times? And because I haven't seen any guidebooks yet as far as what needs to take place.
Yes, in fact, President Kaler, Mr. Tovich, there's individual information in that box for the teacher, and then I know each individual site has detailed plans that they're putting together, and then we're working through with our custodial staff as well as far as training with our high-touch custodians, which we appreciate the board for supporting those positions that we're adding as well. And so, yes, that's all in process.
We had a conversation about additional staff. Is all the staff in place right now for the maintenance that we asked for in reference? I think we were asking that you were saying part-time, and I think Mr. Glover asked in reference to full-time employees. So have we brought additional maintenance staff onto each one of our campuses so we're prepared? Have they been hired?
President Kaler, Mr. Witovich, I know just in the last couple of days that decision was made in terms of some staff. What we were finding is some sites were having difficulty hiring the part-time position. And so what we have done with some flexibility is allowing sites that have currently people hired as part-time people, allowing them to take that part-time position and make that a full-time position. And so that process, a number of sites had already hired that part-time position, but there are sites that were having trouble, and so that that we've given them that flexibility thanks to our HR department. And so that's in process. So I would say about half of our sites have had somebody, and then the others are looking at probably current people and looking to move them to full-time positions.
So if we're looking at opening the schools on September 8th, we're still not there yet in reference to staffing needed for the maintenance?
Good evening, President Kaler, members of the board, Dr. Thomason, my fellow colleagues in cabinet, board member Witovich. If we're looking at September 8th as a reopening, they will be transitioned and ready, because as Dr. Fowler mentioned, we've already hired a number of them, and the other sites have opted to now look at increasing their current part-time employees that they already have encumbered to full-time status. So they'll shift to full-time status, if not this week, next week.
Yeah. One other question, where are we at on the filters? Are all the filters in place?
President Kaler, Mr. Witovich. So we have received replacement filters, and so those were installed in all of the classrooms that were in occupation now, and then the additional filters are on order and arriving in the next week or two. And so as soon as those come in, those will be replaced as soon as they arrive. And so that's in process.
I'm going to piggyback off that, Mr. Witovich, that I think, our teachers and our staff, not everybody watches every board meeting. They haven't seen every detailed PowerPoint that we've presented. They haven't heard everything that we've heard, and we soak it up and we kind of take it all for, I take advantage that we know what we've decided on up here. But I think it's really important that our teachers get that time for training on classroom expectations when it comes to the cleanliness and the disinfecting. And again, I'm all for those videos. I think videos are a great way to, I'm very visual. So if it gets to the point where more of that needs to take place, I would be all for that.
President Kaler.
Please, Mr. Glover.
Thanks. So it looks like we're moving on here pretty soon to item 7.2, and just to my fellow board members, I would just say you still have time to look at the numbers, to watch our neighbors, and we would still have time to meet that date if you all were intent on that date. A recent national poll says that 1 in 3 educators now say the virus has made them more likely to resign or retire early. You can feel their anxiety in some of the letters we heard today. I think it sounds like there's a lot of, if this does happen to pass, it sounds like you all have a lot of work to do. And I would encourage you to go out and talk to people in person, to let them hear and see and ask and say the things that need to be said, because what I don't want to have happen is for us to be the next J.O. Combs. That here we go, everybody's coming back 100%, but you got like 60 teachers not showing up today. So then what does that do to those classrooms? So I think there's some work that needs to be done, and I don't think it could be done via email. I think it would be wise for the cabinet to go out and to listen to our teachers and talk to them and talk about some of the numbers. And I do think looking at Higley's data, just the Higley school area, to me that was very enlightening, and that helped me think about things differently than I had. So, I don't know what's going to happen on 7.2. I don't know, but there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. I guess one other concern that I've heard repeat about since we're talking about reopening schools is this 14-day quarantine for a student. Can we just talk about for a second, maybe elementary and secondary, just putting some parents at ease that we've had lots of students in the past that have had to go out for a long period of time for various reasons, illness. So some of those questions I've always said refer back to your principals. But in general, I'll let you guys kind of take. We provide the education, materials that the student needs during that time. I'll let you kind of, Canvas is now up, but just to put those parents' minds at ease that there is a plan in place for those if there was a quarantine situation.
President Kaler, members of the board, yes, that's a very important part. So one of the things that we've been talking about, and we've talked about it several times, is the understanding that this is a different approach this year when it comes to attendance, and being the fact that if you don't feel good or if for any reason, we want you to stay home. If there's the need to quarantine, obviously there's going to be the need to stay home. One of the things that is an ongoing part, even when we return to in-person learning, is Canvas is going to be a management system, a portal that ends up being a place where you can go if you are out to get your information or assignments or tasks. No, it won't be like there won't be the live instruction like there was when it was in remote learning style. But if you are out, the lessons or activity or assignment will be posted so that your student can continue to get information and can continue to work while they are out. So it will be a place that we continue to use even when we are in person. We may use our Canvas learning management system more than we had before. It will be a versatile platform for in-person as well as at home. It'll be a way that we communicate with each other and turn in assignments and those things. So right now, it's the primary vehicle for how we're connecting. It will continue to be an important vehicle for home-to-school connection, monitoring what students are doing and how they're doing it. So again, it will be an important part of what sustains.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for Mrs. Reese? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Dr. Foley, that's a good point. And I know Canvas is new to elementary. But the high schools used it more, middle schools used it more than elementary, but not as much as high school. And that's the same thing that's happened in the past when a student's been out for any reason, whether they've been sick, that they've had access to their assignments and everything in Canvas. And in addition to that, I know with our teachers that if we have someone out sick, they'll be communicating with whether, and when I say sick, whether they're quarantined, whether they're ill, whether they just need to be home. I know our staff will be communicating with them to make sure that they understand the assignments that are in Canvas and if there is any questions, and will be available for them. And I appreciate the comment about this is very different this year for attendance. Several years back, we had H1N1, the swine flu, and if you had the swine flu, you had to be out of school for 10 days. And it hit our district. We had kids that were out, and it was the children that actually was the at-risk group. And so we at that time did not change our attendance policy. I unfortunately had a child who got the swine flu, and I continued to receive letters from the district about truancy because he was not permitted to go to school for 10 days. So anyway, I appreciate that. I hope we have made those changes so electronically these letters don't go out, because that's frustrating. But it's appreciated that we're encouraging anytime you don't feel well, stay home. Attendance is okay.
Yes, the only time you will be contacted is if you didn't let us know your child was out sick and for how long your student would be out sick, because we need to make sure that we need to know that. We report that for, obviously we report it, but you will not receive attendance letters for after missing so many absences. That has been suspended. And again, going back to the conversation earlier tonight, it's really important to remember that if you don't feel well, stay home. That doesn't mean the world thinks you now have COVID. It means you're being responsible for monitoring your symptoms, and hence we need you to do that. And in the event that you do, that we need to be in communication, and confidentiality is important, but it helps us help keep everyone else safe so that we can communicate appropriately. So this will be a new navigation for us as we return, and when we return. And whenever that may be, we're going to be navigating, living through we're still in the middle of a pandemic until there is a vaccine. So health and wellness will be an ongoing theme that we're going to have to navigate together.
I do have one question in reference back to the health slides. If I remember right, on the health slides on the notification, the teacher wasn't part of that plan. In reference, it looked like it was HR, the nurse on site. The teacher, even though they're in the classroom, since they will be always wearing a mask, or they're always going to be secondary, and yet they'll see children in their classroom leaving and not coming back, and they'll get an email a day or two later. wouldn't the teacher should be on the front line as well as the HR people, so they can kind of keep an eye on the rest of the students if they see any other symptoms in the classroom to keep them part of it? I mean, I'm just kind of concerned why the teacher is not, since they're on the front lines and they could help out HR or any of you, the nurse in a minute. So I'm just kind of concerned on that one.
President Kaler and Board Member Wotovich, I understand that concern, and it's been brought up a lot. And again, reiterating every weekly conversation that I have with the Health Department just on their webinars and daily conversations I have about reiterating the confidentiality. It is across the board a consensus that teachers, while are able to know that they sent their student to the health office and that that student went home, they do not need to know why at that point. If they're identified as a primary contact, they still will not know by who. They will know that they're a primary contact of a positive case. But names, reasons that they went home, down to signing out for why a student went home, are all staying confidential.
If during the school day the teacher took off her mask to get a drink of water in the classroom or did something like that, then she would be a primary contact, correct? Because
No.
the mask came off.
But not for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm sorry,
Change.
changed.
The mask off, you know, who knows? I mean, if they need to sit down, if they eat lunch in the classroom or something like that, they're taking the mask off for more than 10 minutes. I mean, I'm just,
No, I completely understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, and I hear your fear with that, but teachers are not assigned to be on that front line of a confidentiality and knowing why a student went home. They'll be notified if they're a primary contact, just like anybody else would.
okay. I'm just.
And again,
I'm
these aren't our
comfortable-
rules. This is
Exactly.
above us. This is above us, but I understand
that,
your
but my concern
concern.
is the nursing staff comes in with this full gear on, and there's the teacher sitting in the classroom with the mask, okay? I mean, let's help the person on the front line here, and I thought the more we work together as a team, we can get through this. I mean, that's my concern, and I
Here's the
understand it's above us, but.
And
but,
Mr.
you know,
Witovich, we all know, and I've had this conversation with Dr. Foley, that a student, their privacy will not remain private, not in this community. And that's just, I'm just being real, that as soon as there's a case and a student goes out and then another person hears about it, it's on social media or Snapchat with the kids before we even hear. And that's just the nature of our community. And I don't mean that in just a terrible way. It's just the reality that very few things stay private.
And I think, sorry, Dr. Foley, and I think I have two schools of thought on that, and I agree, and I think if our teachers know, and I'm thinking more secondary, then someone comes into class and says, oh, so Joe's got COVID, and the teacher's like, yep, not realizing, not thinking. I mean, it's just a response, and I'm not trying to say that they're irresponsible or anything like that, but it's hard to look at somebody and say, well, I'm not at liberty to discuss that with you. And then at that point, someone looks at them and says, okay, you don't have to, you've said enough. But my other school of thought on that is that would they not always be a primary contact? Because we will not, we've already said physical distancing in our classrooms is not possible. And like Mr. Witovich brought up earlier, is they're not going to be able to know that they spent 15 minutes within 6 feet of a kid. And so if they're in that classroom, then they're moving around, if they're at the front of the classroom, the kids who sit in front, they're going to be less than 6 feet. Now, they'll be more than 6 feet from the ones behind, but would that not, based on those guidelines, just because they were wearing a mask, would that not make them that primary contact?
Correct. If they were wearing a mask, they are not a primary contact.
Even though they were less than 6 feet?
Even though they were less than 6 feet.
You know, Mrs. Reese, in reference to that too, as you're mentioning, that we're going to be going to the teachers in that classroom to ask what students were not wearing a mask on that certain day. So are they not going to be your primary contact? Because they're going to be the person that can tell you if they were sitting around a certain student who was not wearing a mask that day. You're going to have to rely on the teachers as the primary contact in that classroom, correct?
President Kaler and Board Member Wojtovich, I think for me, thinking about this, it goes back a little earlier when we were talking about everyone being aware of what's going on in the education for the students and the teachers. And I have to say that I really hope there's not a student that is not wearing a mask for 15 minutes without some sort of redirection and some more education and importance of wearing that and what that looks like. So that would be part of the working together and making sure that we get that education across.
Mrs. Wilson.
All right, I just have a little statement, and I was trying to figure out where to put it, so I think right here is the good time to say it. Today we are here again talking about reopening of schools. I would venture to guess that every one of us up here has read countless emails, spent hours researching articles, thinking and praying on what to do today. I personally have cried reading emails from parents, teachers, and staff on both sides of this hotly debated issue. I understand both sides. Mental health is real. COVID is real. I never thought when I was gathering signatures to be elected to this board that I would have to choose between someone's physical health and someone's mental health. And that's what we are being asked to do. I empathize with both sides today. I'm reading that people have lost someone. I get an email and I read that a family member has been lost to COVID. The next email I'm reading is about the mental health of the kids, teachers, staff, and parents that need that personal contact. I get an email one moment from a nurse begging us not to go back because of hospital bed rates, and then I get an email from another nurse begging us to go back because of psychiatric hospital bed rates. We have divided our community. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Whatever decision you make is right for your family. Make it, and it is the right decision. Please don't judge others for their decision. We don't know what they're dealing with. Safe means different things to different families and different people. Some feel it's safe to go back and some do not. Please don't judge. It's okay. Please continue to show kindness and show your kids kindness matters. Thank you.
Very well said. Beautiful. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Any other questions or comments about reopening of schools before we move on? I am trying to delay if it doesn't show. Okay, here we go. Well, we have to do a vote here. So 7.2 is the vote on reopening schools. Well, 7.1 is now complete. We're moving to 7.2. I was going to make it right now. Can you wait for that one? Is that okay? Okay. So I make a motion that the governing board approves the return to in-person learning, teacher-led classroom instruction to begin on September 8th, 2020, if the public health benchmark metrics continue to be met.
Second.
Questions, comments, concerns?
I do have some questions. One is the certified staff was made aware of this on Tuesday, I believe, yesterday, at which point they were asked if they had any questions or concerns to discuss them at that time. If we're making a decision today, how can I'm not even aware of any of these questions that these teachers had or concerns. Anywhere, I'm sure I do have some questions, like if a teacher needs to be out on quarantine, are we going to pay their sick leave for them? I mean, those are some of the things that are taking place. So just to find out where we're going to be at with the questions that the teachers had yesterday. How are we even going to address any of their questions if we were going to ask this decision right now?
I know, Mr. Wojtovich, we did cover that in a meeting, but again, I go back to not every teacher has watched every meeting, and even though we live it every day and we have the information, I don't know how much we have
it's not about watching the meeting. The principals had a presentation when they read to the teachers this. At that time, the teachers were asked if they have any questions. It's not about watching a board meeting. It's questions that the teachers had at that time. So who's addressing those questions that those teachers had for us to move forward on September 8th? And how are we going to get to that by September 8th? I'm sure questions would be, how are the teachers going to be getting paid? Who's going to train them? How are we going to set up the classroom? Are you giving us release time to set up our classroom? Some teachers have not been in this building since March, and we want them to open up. Are they going to teach online and the same day teach online, that evening go into the classroom? I mean, where are the questions that the teachers are asking? Who's going to answer them so we get these in place? Okay, if somebody can tell me that part, I guess that may be, okay.
President Kaler, Board Member Witovich. So one of the things, we had a meeting with our principals on Monday 1st. We had a meeting with them first to say, one, that this was a board item that we would be talking about, that I had put together the video for them for the slides that would be discussed so that they could share with teachers, because we wanted our teachers and our employees to hear about and not be caught off guard by this agenda item. We talked with our administrators about once an in-person date is returned, they have been working on these for a long time, these playbooks, these understandings of what it looks like on your campus, what are some of the things that you're going to do, some of the HR-related issues, but providing that some of the health issues obviously have continued to change, that have been formalized over the last several weeks. So once that date is determined, we talked about how important it is knowing a date, whatever that might be, then we'll begin to provide some time with teachers to outline what does that look like for their campus, as well as address some of the questions that administrators got. Our following up with our administrators today was, some of them had questions, concerns, and wanted to vent or voice their frustrations, which we wanted to hear. Some of them were encouraged to email. They were also encouraged to make comment. The specific questions, we obviously would work with our administrators to make sure are addressed in their training for their site. The recording of the health training that would be part of. We also are going to look to find ways to give some teachers some additional time and finalize where and why that might be. But again, as soon as there is a determination of a date, we can finalize what that might look like for our teachers. So again, we're really wanting to understand what those questions and concerns are so that we can respond to them appropriately. I do believe a lot of the questions that they're going to have will be answered by some of the protocols or the quarantine question. I mean, how many dates are you available for, so that we can help answer those things? Because thus far, their energies, as they should have been on remote instruction, and they have been spending hours learning their new management platform and engaging their students. So I think it was, once the date is finalized, or when we have that, providing the additional training on what does that transition back to in-person learning look like. And in the meantime, we have been finalizing what those documents, protocols, videos will look like, so that principals can figure out when and how to do that for their staff, and providing some kind of time for them to be prepared for this transition.
Board members, as far as the September 8th date that we're talking about, personally, I would be comfortable if we did go with the September 8th as a recommending. But as I said earlier, this, as people were saying, cherry picking and bringing different things together, I want to see the fact that we're going down, the numbers are going down. So when these students and staff are coming into this building on September 8th, that the numbers are going this way, okay? So I would only be comfortable if we had a board meeting on Thursday, September 3rd at 7 o'clock or whatever time, so we can see at that point the report that says, hey, the stats that show tomorrow, Thursday, are down. Next Thursday, down. I would be okay knowing that we're going down. And instead of saying, okay, all of a sudden, we're looking at opening school on September 8th and bang, there's a problem out here. We can grab it in time and not open up school if there's something really happening in one of our local communities, that we can continue online and say, oh, okay, let's grab it back and see what's going on. That's just my thought in reference to that.
Well, Mr. Witovich, as we discussed kind of over the the last Friday in our executive session, how much work is going to be involved in making this transition. I hear you, and I think that as board members, we need to look upon ourselves, make sure we're looking at the data, make sure we know what we're watching. I know I review it daily for multiple reasons, and I think that if we're looking at those, we'll look at them tomorrow. I know that. Based on the daily trends, it's going to continue to come down, and we'll see what Dr. Foley and her team has seen, and that's why they recommend, because we're on this continuous downward trend. And I'm not okay with with 5 days of pulling that plug. One, the amount of time that it's going to take and the work in the background, making all the changes, switching students to the online, the in-person, switching the teachers, and for our families, because they have to plan as well, and they need to make arrangements, and whether they work in their home, out of their home, if there's transportation, things like that. And with 5 days notice, let me clarify, if there is a major change within our COVID numbers, that is absolutely what would need to happen. But I wouldn't want to plan on saying, well, we're not going to quite give the full go-ahead until the 3rd. And so I think that as board members, just as we said when we initially met, and obviously when we initially talked about it, the data that we had in the Arizona Department of Health dashboard, we were looking at July data, because there's almost a 3-week lag. And so it was really old. And so that was part of that discussion. And so I think if as board members, and I know our teachers are looking at it, I know our administrators are looking at it, I think if we continue to monitor it, and if need be, I think we pull an emergency meeting together to only pull the plug. Instead of saying we're going to plan to have a meeting to make sure it's good before we go ahead. I don't know if this passes and the plan is the 8th, I don't think any board member would have an issue coming together if something went horribly wrong between now and then, to have an emergency meeting to pull the plug, and we'll have to deal with that. But to say that that's kind of when we're going to really make the full decision, I think is too hard.
I agree with that's what I meant to say, okay? It wasn't to have the meeting to say, well, if we continue. No, that's what I want to say, exactly how you transpired it, is to go with the 8th date, but let it be known if there's any red flag comes up between now and that 8th, that we're going to come together to have a conversation. That's what I meant to say, okay? So we're on the same page.
So meaning,
yeah.
If those numbers on the 3rd are way crazy, yes, and it's an issue, then kind of in the background, we should make ourselves available.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, because it sounded like you were asking us to schedule a meeting for that day, and that's when we would really kind of give the go-ahead, and that's why I was saying I was not okay with that.
I think as long as it's in the back here that says, hey, if there's something happening, that we're going to come together. It's not just written in stone saying, oh, it's going to be the 8th no matter what. No, it's not going to be the 8th no matter what. We're going to take a look at what's happening, and if there are some things coming out there, then we'll get the phone call and say, then at that time. That's what I meant. Okay.
Go ahead, Mrs. Wilson.
President Kaler, it does say in here, if public benchmarks metrics continue to be met. So just to help you out, Greg, it does say in the recommendation from the superintendent and associate superintendent. did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to agree on what equals a green check mark, though, too.
Oh, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Mrs. Kaler. I was going to say, all along, I've wanted to look at our local data. And when we had our meeting and I brought local data, then I was accused of making up my own numbers, but using their numbers just in our area. And knowing that our area was not trending the same as Glendale and Maricopa County. And so I hear the comments about cherry picking. These are all, whether it's from the county or from the state, these benchmarks have always been recommendations, and they've never been requirements. And looking at our area, and now looking at the surrounding areas, Gilbert Public Schools, and they're returning in a hybrid model, but on September 8th. Mesa's moving towards that. And sorry, Mesa, they're in the red in many areas around them. And initially that first week when we were our own yellow item and everywhere was red around us, everyone was concerned because we have people coming from Gilbert when a different Gilbert zip code was red. And those numbers have dramatically decreased. When we look at some of the numbers, we went from a 6.31 to a 4.8%. And we went from 63.3 cases per 100, and we dropped that by 50% in a week in our area. So our surrounding areas have also improved. And like I said, I track the information daily, and they're going to continue to improve because what we look at today and how our numbers have trended down for the last couple of weeks, what our numbers are today aren't going to show up on our report for almost 2.5 weeks. And so we've continued to trend down. So I understand people's comments, and I get it, and we're still using the same numbers. We haven't changed the numbers. I hear you, Mr. Glover. We're applying one metric in one place and not in another. And I think that I've supported returning in school, and I think that the numbers have continued to improve, which further supports it. Like Mrs. Wilson said, we hear from both sides all the way around. We will hear from one doctor and say it's absolutely time to get these kids in school. It's what they need to do, and it is safe. And then we will hear from another doctor that says, are you out of your ever-loving mind about thinking of returning these kids to school? So there is no clear, defined line or place. So it is very, very divided. But I think with like I said, our data is weeks old. We continue to improve, and I think that our failure rate of our kids within our district is very high. It's very clear that they're struggling. We need to get them in front of their teachers, and that we had discussed multiple dates, and the 8th was what made the most sense with all the work that needs to be done behind it. And I know people say just wait until fall break because then you have that time to do it. Fall break will be a natural break for any cases that may come up, because there probably will be some cases. That's going to happen. And so that will be a natural quarantine, if you will, from school anyway. And so I think it is time for our kids to go back to school. And get into that new routine, yes, we'll have a natural break, but then I think that mentally, then they will be more prepared even after fall break to return.
Go ahead, Mr. Glover.
Well, I thank you for your passion. You know, the 8th doesn't make sense to me in case anybody didn't figure that out, but that still doesn't, I know how you feel about what's green to you, but you all need to, I mean, before you make this vote, I really think we should be clear on what equals a green, because if we do have to go back and you do have to tell people because things went backwards, what are we going to base it on? So I would like to maybe hear from you all of what you guys think is green or yellow or red, because you might have to make those decisions.
Yes, Mr. Glover, I appreciate you asking us all for that clarification, and I do believe when it goes back to what metrics that boards can look at, it was very clear that once the Maricopa County gave us clear direction of Higley, we could use those. And so I think it's important that we are looking at all the data that we have before we make a decision. And again, it is a 2-week lag. I know people are saying, well, we should watch for Queen Creek. We should see what happens with, North Gilbert ALA and things like that. But it's still going to be a 2-week lag. It'll be a month before we see anything from that area. So I'm with you, Mr. Witovich. I want to watch these numbers. I clicked last week. I was on my computer all day just looking at refreshing those numbers and watching them, and I absolutely am going to watch them. And I understand, Mr. Glover, your concern, and I love your heart and your passion for hearing our teachers, and I think we all echo that. We love our teachers. We love our staff, and I want them to feel as safe as they possibly can returning, and that word safe has a vast, vast meaning. I cannot guarantee safety of my kids or my teachers. That is the reality of this, and it's so hard. And I don't think there's a single one of us up here that wanted to sign up for this or thought we'd ever be sitting here having these discussions and this being thrown on our laps. And so I'm just gathering all the data that I possibly can. I'm listening to the experts, and I'm just trying to do the best I can by the students, the teachers. We have the option, which I'm so thankful for, that we do have an option. If it's not in school learning, we do have it. Is anything perfect? No, not right now. And so I struggle. I do know we've had a lot of kids on our campuses. We've had sports going for weeks and weeks, all summer long. We took 1 week off, was it, Mr. Locke? Three weeks total off. Otherwise, the students have been doing their practicing, and they did in phases by what AIA, encouraged. We've had community ed on our campuses. We've had, now we have support services on our campuses. So it's not that our campuses have been complete, totally shut down. We've had things happening on our campuses, and things have been going really well. And even for those school districts that open, it sounds like things are going really well. And I hope and I pray that that's the direction that we're headed. And again, if anything is not perfect right now, this is not perfect. I welcome any other comments.
Mr. Glover, in reference to your question, I want this to be done right, okay? I don't want to see what other districts around us have done with as a free-for-all, and it's just a mess everywhere around here. I want us to do it together. I want the safety of our teachers. I want them to be okay. I want our students to be okay, and I want our administration to be okay. And I just want this to be done right, and safety to be involved on this. And I guess in reference to the 8th date, in reference to this, I'm going to be watching these next 2 Thursdays, believe me, okay? So, and if something's by next Thursday on that 3rd not, then we're going to be having a meeting. So I'm watching here, okay? I'm not just going to blanket say, okay, we're going to go back to school, everything's fine. No. Oh, I'm going to be watching these Thursday, and I know all of us are, and so that's where I'm more comfortable with that, knowing that at any time we can pull back and see what takes place, because that gives us another 2 weeks in reference to that too as well.
Thank you, Mr. Witovich. I think we're all on the same page on that. And the other thing is that September 8th, it does give our behind-the-scenes employees who are going to be working around the clock all weekend to do the split. And we had a lot of information on that last week, and it is a huge job. And so the 8th did come up not just for the benchmarks, but for also that extra day for those behind the scenes. And again, having the conversation with our administrators and our teachers and trying to find some space for them. Like you said, Mr. Witovich, if they haven't been in their classrooms, we want to give them that time. I definitely want to try to do whatever we can to provide that time for them to come in. So yeah, again, it's not perfect. Okay, so with that, we will vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. And with that, we are going to take another little break. Thank you.
President Kaler, though, before, is
Sorry.
it too late? I'm not going to say anything ranty, crazy, just for Mr. Lotzenheiser and for the parents that now have to plan and make some decisions. There's a lot of comments and concerns about particularly electives at the secondary, and I know we had talked about you're trying to figure out the best to do the most for the most kids, and people I think in the community have made some assumptions that there's no possible way that X could be offered, and I don't think that's true. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they can contact the school. You have a plan. You're doing the best you can. Maybe you could talk to that while people are thinking about this, if that's okay with. Thank you.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Glover.
President Kaler, Board Member Glover, yes, we are absolutely making sure that if there's an elective issue, please contact your school. There's flexibility that we have. Is everything going to be offered? Probably not. However, we can work together, and really those numbers, and that's where we really need to shore up who is the people who are planning on not returning, and that way that could help us, because the more people are there, the more it makes it easier for us to get a teacher to have that class. And so there's some things that were not on the list that we're hoping to be able to add, because if the need is there, we're going to provide it. What happens is when it becomes that individual one-off student, or that sometimes that's where we're going to have to make some hard decisions. But we're working that, and we're meeting with our principals and Mrs. Martins right now to work on some of those HR issues behind the scenes, also to figure out where we can merge student need, teacher need, get it together so that we can make it the best for everyone as possible. And so, yes.
And I think it's just really good. I know we're still going to continue to get a lot of emails from our community, but very specific questions that you have, please email your principals. Each site I know has worked really hard on a lot of different things that they can answer, because if not, I'm forwarding the email and it gets forwarded, and then you'll finally get your answer. But a lot of our principals have this information. So again, those concerns, but I know we're still going to continue to get lots of emails, and I welcome each and every one. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Dr. Foley wanted to have a little comment, and then we're going to move on to our athletics update.
President Kaler, members of the board, what I want you to know is that we will work immediately with our administrative team to also create some time for our teachers. We may need to, we'll finalize what that may look like so that teachers can have a few days here where assignments may be more independent on those last few days, so we can give more time for teachers to be able to transition with the state. Now that we have a date, we will work to figure out how to operationalize this to work as the best that we can to give more time for teachers to prepare for this transition. So know that we'll work immediately with our administrative teams tomorrow to start figuring out where and how and why and communicate that as quick as possible.
Thank you. We definitely want to make space and time for our teachers to prepare, and they are vital to us in that. So vital. Thank you for that.
And we appreciate them very much.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Lotzenheiser, is that it right? Ooh, getting better. Thank you.
President Kaler, members of the board, tonight we're going to update you a little bit more on what our plan for athletics is moving forward. And I need to put a caveat on there. Like many things, there's a lot of different factors at play, and there's a lot of different things that could be changing. The AIA, while they have, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. While the AIA has not currently changed the timeline for fall sports, there are a lot of discussions that are continuing to happen right now. And I'll be honest with you, there is possibilities for some of that to happen. I don't know where that's going to go. We've had some districts within the state that have postponed their athletics until they return to in-person learning, which could be October. And since they are on people's schedules and they are playing, that could have a direct impact on our scheduling and different things. Those are still questions that are out there, and I don't have specifics on them. I've got to be involved in 2 different meetings the last 2 days, one with all the district athletic directors in the state with the AIA, and then the 6A conference when we looked at football specifically, and we don't have answers yet. One of the reasons we don't have answers yet is that there's a sports medicine advisory committee. The meeting for that is tomorrow. They are supposed to make recommendations to the AIA executive board, who is then meeting next Tuesday. And we hope to have more direction at that time. So in our last meeting, I said, hey, I wanted to come back to you and tell you what the plan are. We're still kind of on hold on a few things. Okay, but we are planning and preparing for different scenarios to play out. As you can see, a golf spirit line started on the 17th. Cross-country swim and dive started this last Monday. I know we had a big golf tournament today out at Las Colinas, and so those kind of activities already started. Our out-of-state sports, or the sports that have not had a chance to start practicing, are continuing using their summer protocols. We're continuing the current health and safety protocols. Now, these are for our high school sports. Next slide, please. Our middle school, we met with the East Valley Conference, and I think the overriding theme with that is sports are important at our middle schools, and they're important for the culture of the school, and they're important for the development of our students and our coaching staffs as well. And so right now, the goal for the East Valley Conference is to try to fit 4 different sports seasons into 3, starting in October. What that means is we're going to shorten the length of the seasons, and we, instead of playing 10 games, we're probably looking at 6, and then doing a shorter tournament as well. And so the goal in this is, once again, to continue to provide those opportunities. We're going to follow the consistent pattern of what's always been first quarter will be the first group out of the batch. It's going to be a little tricky because breaks happen. And so there might be a time when a team takes a couple weeks off because we're on a winter break, and then they might come back for 2 weeks or something. So we're still working on that specific schedule within the EVC, but the goal is to provide the opportunity for all the students, even in a shortened year starting in October.
Mr. Lotzenheiser, I'm sure that gives a really difficult time for coaching, just because if they overlap, or are they going to try to keep them all separate?
We're going to try to keep them all separate.
Okay.
And so one was, can we fit the other ones in? And we felt like so many of our coaches do multiple sports that we really didn't think that we could overlap them so much. So truly, the first quarter is going to be maybe the first 6 weeks of the second quarter would be where we play first quarter sports and kind of go from there and chunk it so that we still have those opportunities. Next slide, please. So once again, an update on our health and safety data coming from our high schools and the participation when, the students that have been on campus. I do want to point out when it says the number of participants that did not attend a scheduled day due to illness, I need to give kudos to our families, because if there has been an incident where someone thinks that their primary just maybe thinks, they contact the coach and they don't come, or if they're not feeling good, they don't come. And so that's been great. And so that's communication. And with, Jillian Fulton, our nurse, has done a great job of that open communication, that when there is questions or concerned, we are looking into it and making sure that we're following our protocols. So it's not saying that we had 6 kids miss a day because they were sick. It is just out of concern and caution for what we're looking at. But I'm very happy with the processes that our coaches and sponsors are doing on our campuses at this time.
Mr. Lotzenhauser, real quick on that. That doesn't mean 6 different kids either,
No.
because you explained this data a while ago.
Yes.
Can you go through so that people
because
understand
really
the numbers?
Really, it's practice sessions. So we missed 6 sessions. So it could be one person who missed 3. Well, they'd count for 3 up there because we're taking it daily and we're looking at it daily. So we don't individualize and say one student. It's how many practice sessions have been missed. And honestly, that's not 6 kids. I'm pretty sure that's only 2 kids, but they just missed multiple days. Next slide, please. So when we start looking at it, I just kind of want to frame our conversation about what it looks like when our events truly start to happen. Now, there's some issues that we're going to talk about, one of them being transportation. And this is something coming up when we talked about the rest of the schools in the East Valley, how we do it. And we understand that we will be providing transportation. But at the same time, parents might feel more comfortable allowing either their student to do their own transportation or them transporting themselves. So we're working, and we will provide for you a more very specific form that parents will sign and turn in that would allow their student to either drive themselves to the competition, so therefore they're not on a bus with everyone all of the time, or the parent will drive them and provide that transportation. And, a lot of times when we talk about teams and buses, when we have a large number of kids, we'll try to spread them out on as many buses as possible, but if a parent doesn't feel comfortable, that's not going to limit them from going to the event and participating in the event. In conversations with the high school athletic directors, we are also looking at our schedules, and if there's a possibility for us to change where we're not driving to the West Valley to compete and we're keeping it locally within the East Valley, that is a priority for us right now because we do understand those transportation concerns. When we talk about cost effectiveness of transportation, please understand that traditionally our transportation is paid for from our gate receipts, from the people who come to our games. And so, we manage that budget very specifically, that's what pays for it. So we know we might have a little bit of a challenge this year should we have to have reduced number of people at games. And at the same time, we want to add additional buses if necessary to transport our people. And so that's something as a district we're looking at the feasibility and what other different funding sources we can look at to continue to provide those options for parents. Go ahead, Mr.
Well, on here,
Yep.
on the right slide. Hang on. Yeah, I'm on transportation. All right,
Okay.
thanks. So it says that the form must be completed prior to a student using private transportation.
Yes.
Could the coaches bring them with them? I mean, if a parent doesn't take the kid there or doesn't sign, and they just show up to the event to pick them up, could they sign? I mean, is there any reason why they couldn't sign that form that evening?
No, it just needs to be turned in. Like typically after a competition or something, they get released directly to a parent afterward or anything like that. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, so hit me again.
I mean,
Sorry.
so it says the form has to be completed if a parent's going to pick up their kid after a game?
So to pick up the kid after the game, that's kind of a different process.
Okay.
Coaches normally have a sign-out sheet. No, this is more, they're not going to even ride the bus with the team to the game.
Okay.
And so,
all right, but so it's not limited to the other. All right, that's fine. I'm
Yes.
sorry. All
Mr.
right.
Glover, I thought you were asking if the coach could drive the child, and I was like,
No, I
absolutely
was
not.
not asking that at all. No,
That's
no.
what I heard.
No, it's a parent picking up a kid afterwards. I just want to make sure that they could, that we don't make the kid ride the bus back. I just thought that was unusual. So okay. Fine.
no, okay, yes.
Misreading on my part.
Okay, go ahead, go next slide, please. So there's something that I think is really important that when we talk about athletic fees, and this question has come up from different sources, especially considering last spring where some of our seasons were cut short. And so I wanted to just talk to you about the athletic fees. First of all, they are board approved, and so you guys have approved the fees and the amounts already, and we will not be asking you to change those amounts or do anything like that. How we look at the fees and what it goes toward, I kind of use the term it's front-loaded. All right, we know that we're going to have a lot of expenses for a season that happens. That's why we determine the amount that we need from the fee. A lot of this is not based upon how many contests, because we are already looking at coaching stipends or additional coaching stipends that were added coming out of the fees. We're looking at equipment that we needed to purchase coming out of the fees. We're looking at a lot of things that will happen regardless of if the number of competitions is going to be limited. And I think there's some confusion because I think sometimes people are used to, maybe in the club world or doing something else, hey, if I'm going to a tournament, then, we're paying that fee. Or, hey, we have 3 games this week, there must be that kind of cost associated. We've actually got that all built in and ready to go. And so that kind of stuff comes out of different pots most of the time. We're funding that. But the athletic fees really are being structured to this equipment, to the uniforms, and these additional coaching positions. And so I know that there were questions last year about the refundability of fees. Ours were tax credit. We know that tax credit is non-refundable. This year we've given them the option to say, when you pay your fee, you can say tax credit or not. But we still want to stay upfront to people that really athletic fees are not refundable, because athletic fees are part of what we're building in to pay for that season. Up front, we know we're going to have that costs. And I think it goes to the fact that there's a lot of different times when kids leave on their own accord because they might not want to finish a season or finish an activity in that. And at the same time, we're still paying for the coaches to be there, and we're still paying that equipment that we bought them, whether they were there or not. And so I just wanted to open that up so that you guys understand when some of these questions or concerns come to us, really that's where that money is going toward, and it's not based upon a number of games situation. And people have questioned coaching stipends before. If the games get limited, I want you to understand, and wholeheartedly for me, I think our coaches, when you look at hours spent versus the amount of money they get on a stipend, when I was a head basketball coach, I didn't make minimum wage for coaching. I knew that as well, okay? And so I think when we have opportunities to continue to support our coaches and attract and retain quality coaches, it's important to have that consistency of coaching stipends as well.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I think most of the situations that came were just, it wasn't communicated properly, and it wasn't, a better word, it just wasn't communicated correctly, I think, from the beginning. And so there was a lot of miscommunication and a lot of misinformation. It's important that that the parents have the option, tax credit or not tax credit. I love that's on our online, even Kev group page now. So that's awesome. And then also knowing that just because you are in a spring sport doesn't mean that those fees just go to spring sport, correct? Like that, sometimes those have been
We try to minimize the crossover.
Kind of have to, I don't know, spread out the monies, because maybe volleyball needs this year and soccer needs, it's not just all that money that from soccer goes to soccer. Is that correct?
On a small scale.
Okay.
Because we really do try to funnel that fee, and that's why fees are not, we try to be appropriate for that amount. There are some times when we have to do that, and it's a practice, honestly, where I want to be able to take those fees and put it toward that group, and not have to spread it out as much as possible. And I think I want parents also who are listening to understand that if there's a financial need, and if this fee is causing a hardship from your family, please contact your school. We have sources and ways that we can help and support you privately. These are not public matters. And so if there's a need, please come talk to the athletic director, talk to the principal, come and talk to me. We'll figure out a way that I do not want to limit someone from participating because of a financial need. That is not what the goal in this is.
President Kaler. And thank you for clarifying. So there is a difference between our athletic fees and club fees.
Yes.
So this is the $150 right? I'm right? I know it's changed.
I believe, yes.
$150 that they pay for their sport.
Correct.
Not any additional fees they may pay to a booster club, which in some cases within, I believe, cheer and within band, where there are competitions, that money comes out of the booster club, not the athletic fees. So this is the direct football games, basketball games, soccer games, things like that. So there is a difference. And so if a club does have other fees, then they need to be asking their boosters also if it's in addition to that 150, what their process is.
Yes, that's absolutely correct, because there are clubs and different things that do decide to do their own competitions that are not necessarily through the AIA, how we schedule them. And yes, those are additional things that families have to support in that way. But that's not part of this set fee for athletics. Okay, so hosting events is a big ongoing discussion that we're having. And I made the slideshow presentation last week, and I tried to outline different scenarios that we'd look at, because I think there are a lot of different facets and factors to go into what hosting events. First of all, when we're looking at the fall season, in reality, we're looking at two major ones. We're looking at football games and we're looking at volleyball games. Okay, our golf, people can physically distance watching the golf tournaments, okay, and then we don't charge attendance for those. Our cross-country matches are at parks, the same kind of things. We're not managing crowds from that relationship. Our swim and dive, right now, swim and dive, I don't have a lot of answers for, because there are a lot of pools that aren't open yet. And so we are still very much in the process, and we haven't gotten guidance on specifically how. There's a proposal out there that the team swims by themselves at the pool while the opposing team swims at their home pool, and they time them individually and compare the times, and that's how they determine what it is, because there might not be enough pools or to be able to maintain space within it. So lots of different proposals that are out there, and it hasn't been solidified. As soon as that happens, I'll be able to share with you in a superintendent's report some of these next step things that are coming out of the AIA and what they're looking at. But when I looked at hosting events, I think there's going to be some non-negotiables about what happens. And the number one is that masks are going to be required. There is the ordinance. If you're going to come to one of our events, we're asking that you have to wear a mask. And, you know, when you look at it from this perspective, if I'm a senior athlete and I've done so much work and I'm finally going to be allowed to play, why would I want to have people put us in a position that there could be an outbreak or something like that, and now I'd lose my own time again? And I think that that's something where I know the state north to us has already opened, and you know, Utah's playing football right now, and these are examples of how they're communicating with their community about masking up, because they don't have the same rules we do. There's no requirement, yet at their games they're asking for all masks to be there, and I think that that's very important. We will be able to stream our volleyball and our football games. So if you are not comfortable coming to the stadium or to the gym, they will be streamed through the NFHS. We have a little glitch at Williams Field right now because we're under construction, and so they're bringing in a new point-to-point contact to make sure we have the ability to do that. We will be testing that next week, and so right now we're practicing those things so that they're called pixel lock cameras, so that those things work so we can stream all of our events. We will be using a touchless online ticketing process. It's called GoFan. In our meeting today, we confirmed that all of the East Valley school districts will be using GoFan. So even if you're traveling to another event, you'll be purchasing your tickets through GoFan. We do not anticipate having a ticket gate open. We will need for you to have the tickets purchased and brought, and you show it on your phone. We swipe that you've gotten in, then you can get in. So in terms of even exchanging things, money or anything like that with someone for the ticket gate, it's going to be through your phones and through this app called GoFan. Okay, and I think that's going to be an important thing for us. And I know, Board Member Tovich always talks about how are we telling people this, right? How are we getting that? And so we, as high school athletic directors and myself, are working on what the plan is to communicate so that our families know ahead of time, and they don't show up on that first night and go, Well, I've got a 20. How do I get in? You know, this is the process. This is how we're going to do it. This is what we want to do, looking through this idea of our online ticketing through GoFan. The concession stand, once again, it goes to selling prepackaged foods. So that tray of nachos might not be available like it has been in the past, and different things, but just from a health, safety conscious effort, looking at that with concession stands. I put the caveat on there. Once again, the governor and the AIA, there could be changes that could be coming up that we don't anticipate, and we will communicate that directly when we do. I looked at 3 different scenarios. Our first scenario was if we're still in remote learning, then basically we're going to follow and track what we're doing within our schools. About the plan would be what we're doing with our fans. So if we were in remote learning, we do not have kids back on campus, then we wouldn't have fans. And so that was our first scenario. The second scenario is if there was a limited return to campus, or partially, that we would look at doing a limited number of participants coming in fans at our events. And there's a way through GoFan that you can actually assign specific links to students' ID numbers and send it to them. So if I wanted to say any participant, and the reason why I use the word participant is because we know at a football game it's very important for the marching band to be there, and it's very important for the spirit line to be there, whether we have fans there or not. So they would get that option, and their parents would have the link so they could come and watch that. And so that would be a way that we could limit the number of people that are there. We're looking into additional seating. At volleyball games, when you go to a volleyball game, traditionally only one side is pulled out. Pulling out both sides of the stands, allowing people the opportunity to social distance. Once again, we are requiring masks if they cannot social distance. And then if we were in the limited scenario, there are family passes available. We would not be doing the family passes. We feel like we would still need to be very restrictive about how we sell tickets and how we're managing that. Scenario 3 is if we are fully open and in-person learning. And please remember when we look at timelines, I know we just had a vote and we're looking at the 8th, provided all of the metrics are going in the right direction. Our first game, if we look at volleyball, would be on Tuesday the 22nd. Our first football game would be on, for the freshman level, September 30th, with the first varsity football game occurring on October 2nd. And so that's even a little bit more time than it is for us to do that return. And so when we look at this idea of fan attendance right now, and you know, this is where I would love to have feedback. I know we're not asking you for a vote or anything, but I've had feedback from you to not limiting that fan attendance more than the capacity of what our stadiums are. We are looking at football fields, bringing in additional portable stands, whether it's purchasing them for ourselves or renting them from others, because I do want to have the ability for people to spread out as much as possible. Truth be told, I've not been to one of our football games. And so what I hear is that they're very, very popular events, and that we have lots of people there, especially the Williams Field Higley game. And so I know that there's going to be a lot of want and need for people to do that, and that's part of our community. That's part of what we're doing together. And so if there's ways that we can put up and have to get additional funding so that we put up additional stands or portable stands, what we can do is the things that we're exploring right now to be able to do. Remember, we're still going to live stream, and so if that's a concern, we're still going to have that. But then we would look at family passes, continuing to limit them to 4 members per pass, looking at the passes just so that, once again, we still do have some control measures put in, so we do know the number of tickets or the number of people that we're expecting. And so I think these are ongoing conversations we're having with our neighbors, because it also affects what happens when we travel to someone else. And so right now, all of us are putting together visiting team protocols so that we can clearly communicate with each other. Truth be told, the districts are at different levels. Some people are fully open, ready to go. It's kind of like school. Some people say right now, no fans. And so those are communications that we have to do from an athletic director standpoint and from a district standpoint so that we're communicating with that together.
Thank you, Mr. Lotzenheiser, and I'm glad it's you and AIA and our athletic directors making all these scenarios and decisions and things like that. We really appreciate everything you're bringing to us, and I know, again, it's fluid, ever-changing. Mr. Witovich?
In reference to the universities, why is the AIA different than what's happening with the universities? Are they looking at different numbers or something? I mean, I mean, I hate to say the benchmarks, okay, not even, but what are they looking at that the AIA isn't, or what? I'm just a little confused here.
I'll be honest with you, President Kaler, Board Member Ratovich, I don't know the specific answer on that one. I probably read the same articles that you read about why the Pac-12 made their decisions and things like that. And, I can only think of scope of thing, bringing in 100,000 people into, or 75,000 people into Sun Devil Stadium might be a little bit different than bringing, 5,000 people into our stadium. However, I don't know. I know within the AIA, they surveyed and said, where are you guys at as communities who want to come back? And we know that sports is a very passionate area, and a lot of people say, like, get us back now. I know a few parents of senior football players who, like, this is it. And so making some of those decisions, and I think those parts of it go into what's happening here. So, but I can't tell you. It'll be very interesting to see what the Sports Medicine Advisory comes out, and then truly what the executive board for the AIA, if they make decisions, because honestly, they could tell us, based upon this, we're going to push football back for 3 weeks. Well, we're a member of the AIA, and we will do what they tell us to do. In the conversations, there are a few districts who have postponed their fall seasons. They might be looking at doing stuff within the spring, but it's very much on this, similar to opening schools, the local level, and we get told that quite a bit.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other? Okay, we're going to move on to our favorite part of the year. I look at Mr. Glover. 7.4 we are on. So we are going to discuss and may consider action to approve the Arizona School Boards Association ASBA Draft 2021 political agenda and direct the district's delegate to the ASBA Delegate Assembly to represent the board's determined position. Thank you, Curtis. Anyone? Bueller, thank you, Dr. Thomason.
This is the typical silence.
This is the silence, and I hope you've all read through this. I think we have talked about it in the past as well. I think we're all in agreement and support ASBA and what they do for all of our students across Arizona.
President Kaler?
Yes,
Members of the
Dr.
board,
Thomason.
a general reminder that it is virtual this year.
Yes, we don't even have to go in person, and that's clear in October now. They moved it. Usually it's the Saturday after the law conference, and they moved it all the way to October. Okay, do I have a second? Well, and may consider action to approve. So I move that we approve. Back to 7.4, please. Thank you. I move that we approve the Arizona School Boards Association ASBA Draft 2021 political agenda and direct the district's delegate to the ASBA Delegate Assembly to represent the board's determined position.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're really thrilled tonight. And now, oh, I see. We're going to name the delegate. Mr. Glover. Not this year, huh? You're bowing out?
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah.
One
No,
more.
you know
Go
what?
out with a bang.
I won't be here next year anyway, so somebody else
Okay.
can.
All right.
Can I nominate?
It's not a nomination. This is a volunteer or voluntold position.
Okay.
This is not.
I like to nominate Mrs. Wilson.
Oh.
Because I didn't want to see.
Second.
This is an honor. This is an honor. This is an honor to be our delegate, Mrs.
I think
Wilson.
I might have gotten thrown under the bus here, guys. I feel like the bus is running me over a couple times with both of you.
Mrs. Wilson and I are already going to the law conference. on
It will be at the law
on
conference.
virtual, so we are
And
doing
it will
that.
be very fun, because it always is very fun. I think some other people are going as well. Dr. Foley, I think, may be in attendance. Mrs. Martins, maybe sometimes. So
Yes. So now
I will
we-
be at the law conference, so.
Then
Mrs.
you'll be
Reese?
all lawed up to make
Mrs. Reese,
decisions
maybe
on
you
our,
could,
on our agenda here.
Wait, what day, is it the 2nd?
It's October 17th.
Oh, I was like.
It's after
I was
our
gonna
fall
complain
break.
that I was on fall break, but I can't even use that.
All right, I'll go, I'll do it. I'll do it. I make a motion that I, Amy Kaler. It sounds, can you make the motion, please, Mr. Witovich? You make the motion.
Second, Amy Kaler going.
We are being very informal right now. I will make the formal motion, okay? Because Darlene keeps excellent minutes, and we're probably confusing her at the moment.
Mrs. Kaler,
Yes, please, Mrs. Christina Reese.
I move that President Amy Kaler attends on behalf of the Higley Unified School District, the Arizona School Board Association Delegate Assembly.
Second.
All those in favor?
Well, hang on.
Oh, wait.
I will be your reserve backup in case
Oh,
anything happens.
thank you.
How's that?
Mr. Glover
without
came
objection.
through. Oh, I appreciate that. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. I'm going to the delegate assembly. I know you're all jealous. All right, we're moving on. We have some housekeeping. 7.6, I move that the governing board approves $162,220.30 for carpet and flooring replacement at Higley Traditional Academy and Gateway Point Elementary. Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Educational services. I move that the governing board approves a not-to-exceed amount of $1,262,740.41 to maintain the district-wide substitute teachers.
Second.
Questions, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. You didn't want to have another conversation about that this year? Okay, just making sure. 7.8, I move that the governing board approves payment of $195,454.64 to Public Consulting Group for the FY18 overpayment.
Second.
Questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. I move that the governing board approves $1,591,483.85 for the purchase of student devices, device warranties, and software subscriptions to support the one-to-one initiative.
Second.
Questions or comments? These were already on order, and we're just approving this tonight. So I know there was a comment earlier that, do we have an arrival date, or did they arrive? They're here. Thank you. That's what I thought. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. I move that the governing board approves an additional $84,486.40 for the purchase of Canvas and Studio Cloud licenses for distant learning. Questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Special Education Day Schools. I move that the governing board approves the not-to-exceed amount of $2,500,000 for Special Education Day Schools.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. And we're going to have a weatherization project. I move that the governing board approves the final payment of $300,047.06 to Sun Valley Builders for the Coronado Elementary Weatherization Project. It looks great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, future agenda items. We still have a lot coming up. I know that we've had to push some things back because of opening up of school items. Is there anything anybody else would like to add to this list?
I just mentioned last board meeting, I'd like to see us set up some type of program or even have discussion on Be Kindness. I think after all our community has gone through, we need to all come back together. So some type of kindness program would be a wonderful idea for us.
I'm hearing from a lot of our PTOs already that whatever date that was going to be chosen for our back to school, there was going to be quite a festive reentry. We do want to honor everybody coming back and let them know how grateful we are. But I agree with you. We need to come out of this kinder and more united, as we did in other times in our lives that we had tragedy occur. We did come out stronger and more united, and I wish that for Higley, and I do hope that we can do that, Mr. Witovich, as well.
I do like all the signs that are in front of the campuses. I remember there was a name that sponsored it. I can't tell you who did it, but Dr. Foley knows who. And I was just very thankful that they put these nice signs up just to remind us to be extra kind as we're walking into those front offices. So thank you to that company.
President Kaler, board members, one of the things we're going to be kind of doing this is a moving forward together, Higley moving forward together. So we would love to provide updates for you along this theme that looks at building our community together as we navigate this together moving forward.
Love it. Great theme.
President Kaler?
Yes, Dr. Thompson.
Those were donated by Horace Mann and
Horace Mann.
former board member, Mr. Little. And his
Mr.
wife.
Russ Little.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Okay. I know that there is, I just want to shout out to Mr. Tom Blodgett. He tweets our meetings. He stays up late for all these crazy board meetings, town council meetings, and he's always listening to us. So here's your little shout out, Mr. Blodgett. Thank you. And with that, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
President
Motion
Kaler, members of the
carries.
board? I did hear back from the incredible principal, Mr. Jeff Armstrong, on the funds that were donated to Coronado Elementary School.
Yes.
And so those donations were donated specifically for gifted and special education, online instruction programs, and additional backpack sprayers and foggers related to COVID-19.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Have a good evening. Good night.